Tonight, we're uncovering the full history of Giratina and the darkest secrets of the Distortion world. This is a fascinating topic, but I'll keep my narration calm to ensure you can still drift off to sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. In the quiet moments before sleep, we often think about the structure of our world. We think about the ground beneath us, the air around us, and the steady linear flow of time that carries us from one day into the next. In the world of Pokémon, these fundamental pillars of existence are governed by ancient, godlike entities. We know Dialga, the master of time, whose heartbeat regulates every second that passes. We know Palkia, the master of space, whose breath stabilizes the very dimensions we inhabit. Together, they represent the order of the universe, the tangible and the measurable. But there is a third member of this creation trio, a shadow cast by the light of the beginning, a being that represents everything the world is not. This is Giratina, the Renegade Pokémon, and its story is perhaps the most haunting, misunderstood, and deeply layered myth in the entire history of the Sinnoh region. To understand Giratina, we must look beyond the physical world and into the void that exists on the other side of the mirror. Imagine a place where gravity is a mere suggestion, where water flows upward against floating islands of rock, and where the laws of physics are twisted into unrecognizable shapes. This is the Distortion world, a realm of perpetual twilight and silence. It is not just a prison, it is a fundamental part of the cosmic balance, acting as a structural anchor for our own reality. If the world we know is matter, the Distortion world is the antimatter. If our world is the painting, the Distortion world is the canvas, hidden beneath the layers of color and light. And at the center of this surreal landscape dwells a creature of immense power and terrifying isolation. For decades, the legends of Sinnoh spoke of Giratina in hushed tones, often painting it as a figure of pure malice or senseless violence. The ancient texts tell us that when the great Alpha, Arceus, first brought the universe into being, Giratina was there at the dawn of creation alongside its siblings. However, while Dialga and Palkia were granted dominion over the pillars of reality, Giratina was banished. The myths say it was sent away because of its violence, exiled to a world where nothing stays the same. Forced to watch the universe it helped create from behind an impenetrable veil. This narrative of the fallen god has defined Giratina for generations of trainers and scholars alike. It is the story of a rebel, a monster so dangerous that the creator itself had to lock it away in the dark. But as we dive deeper into the lore, from the snowy peaks of Mount Coronet to the ancient wind-swept plains of the Hisui region, we begin to find cracks in this simple story of good versus evil. We start to see a being that is not just a prisoner, but a guardian, a creature that, despite its exile, has stepped forward time and time again to protect the balance of all things when human ambition threatened to tear the universe apart. The influence of the Griseous Orb, the significance of the origin Forme, and the tragic shadow of a being that possesses the power of a god, but none of the worship. Tonight, we are going on a journey through time and space, and then we are going somewhere else entirely. We will explore the origins of the Sinnoh myth cycle and the true nature of the bond between the creation trio. We will investigate the catastrophic events of the Platinum Era, where the leader of Team Galactic, Cyrus, sought to erase everything and start anew, only to be confronted by the very force he failed to account for. We will look at the ancient history revealed in the Hisui region, uncovering the role of the mysterious Volo and the space-time rifts that nearly shattered the past. And we will peer into the silent, shifting depths of the reverse world, as seen in the great cinematics, where Giratina's role as a protector of the environment and the dimensions becomes clear. Why does Giratina exist? Is it truly a creature of rage? Or is it a necessary shadow that keeps the light of our world from burning too bright? What does it mean to be a being of antimatter in a world made of atoms? And what secrets are still hidden in those floating islands where the wind never blows and the sun never rises? The history of Giratina is a story of exile and redemption, of cosmic physics and ancient grudges. It is a story that challenges our understanding of what it means to be a legendary figure. As the lights dim and the world outside grows quiet, Let us step through the rift. Let us leave behind the certainties of time and space and enter the grey, shimmering expanse of the Distortion world. There in the silence, the Renegade Pokémon is waiting, and its true story is finally ready to be told. In the Sinnoh region, there is a legend that refuses to be told, a name that was struck from the history books, a presence that lingers in the shadows of myth, a creature so fundamentally alien that even the gods themselves saw fit to bury its memory. This is the story of Giratina, the Renegade Pokémon, and the realm it calls home, the Distortion world. But to understand why this entity was erased, we must first understand what it means to exist beyond the boundaries of everything we know as real. There is a place that is not a place, a dimension that does not conform to the laws of physics, geometry, or time as we experience them. It is a realm where gravity is a suggestion, where floating landmasses drift in an endless twilight, where water flows upward and direction loses all meaning. This is the Distortion world, the reverse side of the Pokémon universe, a mirror that reflects not light, but the chaos that lies just beneath the surface of order. It is a place that should not exist, and yet it does, and at its heart dwells a being that was never meant to be seen. The first documented encounter with Giratina in the modern era occurs in a human being. Laying eyes on this exile's tremendous form occurs in a place called Turnback Cave, deep within the dark wilds of Sinnoh, hidden behind a veil of perpetual mist. This cave is not a simple cavern. It is a labyrinth of shifting chambers, a place where the boundaries between worlds grow thin. Those who enter often report a creeping sensation of being watched, of the air growing heavy with something that is not quite silence. The cave tests you. It sends you through a maze of identical rooms, requiring you to step through an exact number of pillars in an exact sequence. Otherwise, the path twists, and you find yourself back at the beginning again. It is as if the cave itself is alive, and it is deciding whether or not you are worthy of what lies at its end. And at the end, in the deepest chamber, there is no grand throne, no elaborate altar. There is only a small island of rock, suspended in an abyss of darkness. A single pillar stands at its center, and around it, the air vibrates with an energy that feels like pressure behind your eyes. And then you see it. A form that seems to unfold from the void itself. Giratina in its altered forme, a creature of 6 legs, black and red, with golden bands that glow like dying embers. Its head is crowned with a terrifyingly aware gaze, and the wings that arch from its back are not wings at all, but membranes of pure distortion, flickering like a heat haze over reality. Its first appearance is not a roar or a flash of light. It is a slow, deliberate emergence, as if the creature has always been there and is simply allowing you to perceive it now. This encounter is unsettling on a level that goes beyond simple fear. A regular battle with a legendary Pokémon feels like a clash of titans, but with Giratina, it feels like a test of your sanity. Its movements are wrong. It does not walk like a living thing. It glides, it sinks, it seems to exist in multiple places at once. The very act of fighting it warps the battlefield around you, and you cannot shake the feeling that you are not the hunter here, you are the intruder. Standing in the home of a god that was locked away for a reason. That reason is the heart of the myth. And it is why Giratina was systematically erased from the official history of the Sinnoh region. According to the ancient texts that survive only in fragments, the creation of the universe began with Arceus. From the egg of nothingness, Arceus willed into being 3 fundamental forces. The Alga to govern time, Palkia to govern space, and Giratina to govern the distortion that exists between them, the antimatter, the reverse side of existence itself. But there was a problem. While Dialga and Palkia operated within the framework of a stable universe, Giratina's nature was inherently disruptive. It did not merely inhabit the boundaries of reality. It was reality's negative image, the force that could unravel what the others had woven. The stories say that Giratina was violent, not in the sense of a rampaging beast, but in the sense of a cosmic instability. Its presence in the normal world caused distortions, rifts, and lawlessness. For the sake of order, Arceus made a decision. It banished Giratina to the Distortion world, a prison that was also its natural habitat, a dimension where its chaotic nature could exist, without threatening the fabric of time and space. And then Arceus commanded that this exile be forgotten. The ancient peoples of Sinnoh were instructed to remove Giratina from their records, to speak of only Dialga and Palkia when recounting the creation myth. The name was hidden, the symbols erased, the temples sealed. Giratina became a ghost story, a cautionary tale whispered by elders to warn against the dangers of breaking the natural order. But a legend that is buried does not die. It waits. And in the Turnback cave, that legend still breathes. The silence of the void is not empty. It is filled with the weight of a consciousness that remembers its expulsion. Giratina knows what it lost. It knows the shape of the world it was denied. And when intruders like Cyrus of Team Galactic tear open the boundaries between dimensions, when ambitious humans try to rewrite reality itself, Giratina stirs. It emerges not as a villain, but as a force of nature, a guardian of its own isolation, a being that will defend its realm with a fury that is older than any human history. The dark truth that the history books hide is this: Giratina was never evil. It was simply too much for the world to contain. The Distortion world is not a prison of punishment, but a cage of necessity, and the silence that surrounds it is the silence of a secret that keeps a secret that still has power. In the next chapter, we will go back to the very beginning, to the first breath of creation, understand how Arceus shaped the universe, and why it chose to give form to a force that could one day undo it all. But before we step any further into the distorted corridors of the Distortion world, we need to understand what came before the exile, what existed before there was a world to be distorted. Because the Distortion world is not just a prison, it is a scar left over from the moment reality itself was born. And to understand Giratina, we must first understand the first breath of creation. In the beginning, there was nothing. Not empty space, not darkness, not silence, just the absence of all things. A void without time, without dimension, without even the concept of a beginning. Then from that absolute zero, something stirred. A singular consciousness, formless and vast, known in Sinnoh myth as the original one, Arceus. And with a thought that was not yet a thought, it began to shape reality. But the act of creation is not gentle. It is not a quiet whisper. It is an explosion, a rupture, a tearing of the nothingness apart so that something can exist. The earliest records speak of a vortex of pure chaos, a maelstrom of unformed potential. Into that vortex, Arceus placed a single egg. Not an egg of flesh, nor of stone, but an egg made of the very fabric of what would become existence. And when that egg hatched, reality sparked into being. That was the first breath of creation. Now that spark could not be a single unified thing. To create a universe, you need boundaries. You need a framework that prevents everything from collapsing into the void. And so the original one brought forth three beings, three pillars to hold the universe in place. This is the creation trio. The first was Dialga, the embodiment of time, the flow that gives events sequence and meaning. The second was Palkia, the embodiment of space, the expanse that gives matter room to exist. But there must be a third pillar, because time and space alone are not enough. They are a structure, but without a force that defines their limits, without something that marks the edge of what is real, they would be infinite and formless. That third pillar was Giratina. In the original cosmic order, Giratina was not the renegade. It was not the outcast. It was the stabilizing force that dwelled at the boundary between existence and non-existence. Its domain was the space between dimensions, the shadow of creation, the place where reality meets its opposite. It was the guardian of the threshold, ensuring that the universe had a shape, that there was a firm line between what is and what is not. Antimatter, distortion, the reverse side of reality, these are not curses, they were its purpose. It was the pillar of balance, the counterweight to the sun of time and space. But creation is not static. The universe expands, it changes, it grows restless. And beings born of pure order, do boundaries sometimes find themselves in conflict with the very order they are meant to preserve. Giratina was powerful, wild, and its nature was to push against constraints. It was the most violent, the most unstable of the three, not evil but uncontainable. And in that untamed force, the original one saw a threat, not to the universe itself, but to the fragile harmony of the new world. So a decision was made. Before the fall, Giratina was banished. That banishment was not a punishment in the way we understand sense. It was a necessity. The Distortion world was created as a separate dimension, a realm outside the normal flow of time and space. Where Giratina's power could exist, without destabilizing the rest of reality. This was the moment the third pillar became the Renegade, the exile, the shadow that lurks in the mirror, and the distortion world, once the very foundation of cosmic order, became its prison. But prisons have a way of becoming kingdoms. In the next chapter, we will explore the architecture of antimatter, how Giratina's realm works, why it defies every law of physics we know, and what secrets hidden in its floating islands and inverted gravity. And we will begin to understand why it might not be a prison at all, but a throne. From that single egg, from that first breath of time and space, reality was born. But here's the question that haunts the edges of Sinnoh's ancient myth. What happens to the leftovers? What happens to the opposite side of existence? Because every act of creation demands an inverse. Every law of physics has a shadow. And when Arceus brought forth Dialga to govern the flow of time and Palkia to stretch the fabric of space, something else emerged. Not as a rival, but as a necessity. This is where the architecture of antimatter begins. In the Pokémon canon, antimatter is not treated as a strict scientific concept. You won't find equations or particle accelerators here. Instead, it becomes a mythic principle, a symbolic inversion of everything we call normal. Antimatter, in this context, is the mirror held up to matter. It is the realm where everything is reversed, where direction loses meaning, where the very idea of here becomes fluid. And this is precisely what Giratina embodies. Not a monster of chaos, but a stabilizing counterbalance. Think of it this way. If Dialga is the river of time, flowing forward without end, and Palkia is the vast expanse of space, expanding outward into infinity, then Giratina is the anchor. It is the still point, the distortion that keeps the river from flooding, and the expansion from tearing apart. Without a reverse, without a negative, the positive would consume itself. This is not punishment. This is design. For a world of matter to exist, there must be a place where matter does not. A realm where gravity bends, where up and down become suggestions, where the geometry of reality unravels. That is the distortion world. And Giratina, in its true form, is that realm made conscious. It is not exiled because it is violent, though the legends paint it that way, but because its nature is incompatible with the ordered dimensions of time and space. It belongs to the reverse side, and the reverse side belongs to it. The relationship between the three is not a hierarchy of power, but a triad of necessity. Dialga provides the flow, Palkia provides the stage, and Giratina provides the tension, the distortion that keeps everything from collapsing into perfect sameness. Look at Giratina's visual design, and you see this defiance of traditional biology reflected in every limb. Its origin form is a floating six-legged wraith, no solid ground beneath it, no clear front or back. Its body seems to twist in on itself, with tendrils that trail like afterimages. The wings are membranes stretched across an impossible skeletal frame, more like gaps in the air than actual wings. It has no eyes in the usual sense, only glowing red bands that cut across its head like cracks in a mask. This is a creature that rejects the bilateral symmetry of earthly life. It does not walk, it drifts. It does not breathe, it distorts. Every part of its anatomy suggests a being that exists between states, half present, half absent. Even its altered Forme, the serpentine version outside the distortion world, is a kind of costume, a shape forced upon it by the laws of normal space. In its true home, Giratina is something far stranger, a living contradiction. So when we speak of the architecture of antimatter, we are speaking of the very foundation of reality, as Sinnoh understands it, not as a simple opposition of good and evil, but as a cosmic equilibrium. Matter needs antimatter to exist. Space needs distortion to have shape. Time needs a counter-rhythm to keep from unraveling. And Giratina, the renegade, the banished one, is the guardian of that necessary shadow. It is not angry because it was cast out. It is angry because the world it protects is constantly being invaded, torn open, misunderstood. And that anger, that ancient resentment, is what will lead us directly into the story of its banishment. A tale that begins not with Arceus' wrath, but with a choice made long before the first mortal ever set foot in Sinnoh. The Great Banishment is coming, and it will force us to ask if the distortion world was a prison or a sanctuary. But to understand Giratina's true nature, we must step back from the elegant balance of time, space, and antimatter. We must look instead at the oldest records of Sinnoh, the fragments of text carved into stone tablets In the ancient ruins beneath Mount Coronet, those texts speak of a violence so profound that shook the newborn universe. Not the violence of battle between Dialga and Palkia's clashing domains. That was a natural friction, like two storms brushing against each other. No, the violence described is something far more personal. It is the violence of a being whose very presence unraveled the fabric of the world it was meant to inhabit. The ancient scribes called it the Great Banishment, and they wrote of it with a trembling hand. What exactly did Giratina do to deserve exile? The texts are deliberately vague, almost as if the truth was too terrible to record. Some scholars argue that the creature's aggression was not malicious in the way we understand it. They propose that Giratina's power, antimatter in its rawest form, simply could not coexist with the fragile matter of our reality. Every step it took, every breath it drew, would have annihilated the very ground beneath it. In this view, Giratina was not evil, it was incompatible, a force of creation that, through no fault of its own, threatened to unmake everything it touched. But there is another school of thought, one that points to the Renegade's own temperament. Ancient sources whisper of a being that resented its role, that lashed out against the constraints imposed by Arceus. It sought to dominate, topple the order of time and space, to reshape reality in its own distorted image. That is not the act of a passive force. That is willful rebellion. This philosophical debate has raged among historians and mythologists for generations. Is Giratina a tragic victim of cosmic necessity, or a dangerous entity that deserved its punishment? The answer may lie in the moment of transition itself, the precise instant when Arceus made the decision to cast the Renegade Pokémon into what the world on the other side. According to the Celestic Town legends, Arceus did not simply banish Giratina out of anger. It created a separate realm, a pocket dimension, where antimatter could exist without destroying the rest of creation. This was not a prison in the human sense, but a quarantine, a necessary separation to preserve the integrity of the universe. Yet for Giratina, it was a sentence of eternal isolation. Imagine being removed from the only reality you have ever known, thrust into a place where the laws of physics are unrecognizable, where gravity bends and distances shift at random. There is no sun, no sky, no horizon, only an endless grey expanse of floating rock and inverted waterfalls. No other being to speak to, no purpose except to exist. That is the distortion world, and it is here that we must consider the psychological impact of such isolation on a godlike entity. Giratina is not a mere Pokémon. It is a force of nature, a sentient embodiment of antimatter, but sentience means it can feel. Loneliness, resentment, anger, these emotions are not beyond its reach. In the long, silent eons of its exile, the Renegade's mind would have had ample time to brood. Every moment spent in that distorted realm would have reinforced the wound of banishment. The creature that emerged in the modern era, as we will see in later chapters, is shaped by that trauma. It is not purely a mindless beast. It is a scarred intelligence, wary being fiercely protective of its domain, quick to strike against those who dare to intrude. The violence that first led to its exile may have been instinctive, but the fury born of misunderstanding. But the violence of the distortion world, the way it tears at intruders, the way it bends reality to trap the unwary, that violence is learned. It is the product of centuries of solitude. So as we approach the boundary between exile and the world we know, we must ask, what happens when two realities touch? The walls of the distortion world are thin in certain places, and we have barely begun to map its impossible geography. To truly understand what exile means for a being like Giratina, we have to step into the place where it was sent. The distortion world isn't just a prison, it's a geography of impossible laws. A realm where reality itself seems to have given up trying to make sense. And what makes it so haunting is not just the absence of life, but the presence of something that feels like a broken mirror held up to the world we know. Let's begin with gravity. In our everyday experience, gravity is a constant, a silent rule that keeps us anchored. In the distortion world, gravity is more like a suggestion. It tugs, but it doesn't command. You can stand on a flat stretch of ground and take a step forward only to find yourself walking up a vertical cliff face, because the concept of up has become local, not universal. Floating islands drift lazily in midair, and when you jump from one to another, you don't fall. You almost swim through the air, pulled you gently toward whatever piece of land is closest, the nearest. The physics here are not broken. They're just arranged by a different logic. And then there are the waterfalls. You might expect water to fall downward, but horizontal waterfalls are as common as vertical ones. Streams race sideways across empty space, curving sheets of rock, cascading into nothing because there is no ground below. Rivers flow into the sky, and lakes float like mirrors hovering in the void. The water itself seems to be following some ancient geometry that our eyes cannot quite trace. It's as though the distortion world was designed by a mind that never learned the rules of our rules of architecture. Vegetation exists here too, but it's sparse and strange. Weeds and mosses cling to the floating islands, and from a distance they look like clumps of normal greenery. But get closer, and you notice the leaves are too pale, the stems too angular, and sometimes, when you're not looking directly at them, they vanish. Not because they move, but because the memory of them seems to fade from your perception. Many who have entered this realm describe a kind of visual forgetfulness, where the environment changes the moment you stop paying attention. Perhaps the most unnerving detail of all is the silence. The distortion world is almost completely soundless. There is no wind, no echoes of your own footsteps. Even the waterfalls make no noise. It's as if sound waves cannot form here. Or perhaps they are absorbed by the very fabric of this dimension, and in that utter quiet, you start to feel something else. A weight on the back of your neck. A weight on the back of your neck. A prickling awareness that you are not alone. It's not a sound. It's a presence. The sensation of being watched is so acute that explorers have reported turning around instinctively, only to find nothing behind them but the strange angle of a floating island. This place is a mirror to the Sinnoh mainland, but a distorting one. The spear pillar, where Dialga and Palkia were summoned, stands in our world as a sacred temple above the clouds. In the distortion world, there is a counterpart, a twisted echo of that same structure. The geometry is reversed, walls curve inward, and the floor appears to be the ceiling of some other room. It's as if every landmark on the continent has a shadow version here, inverted and rearranged like a reflection in a broken pool. The distortion world is not just a place. It is the physical manifestation of Giratina's nature, a realm of antimatter that exists alongside our own, but obeys different rules. It's the space where the fabric of reality is threadbare, and it's this very fragility that would soon be exploited by a man who refused to accept the world as it was. That story, the incident that would tear open the boundary between dimensions apart, is what we'll trace in the next chapter. For now, let this geography simmer in your mind, because every impossible detail you've just seen carries a weight that will soon collide with the ambitions of Team Galactic's leader. You have just been exploring the strange physics of the distortion world, a place where gravity bends toggles without warning and waterfalls run sideways, as if the planet itself has forgotten how to hold a shape. Those impossible geometries are not random. They are the signature of a realm that exists as the negative image of our own, a world defined by what it is not. But for all its alien beauty, the distortion world rarely touches the normal plane. It was designed to remain apart, a prison and a sanctuary all at once. That boundary was never meant to break. And yet, in the year 2008, something tore it open. It began not with Giratina, but with a man named Cyrus. To understand the Platinum Incident, you must first understand him. Cyrus was the leader of Team Galactic Commander, a cold and methodical figure who looked at the world and saw only imperfection. He believed that spirit, emotion, even the heart itself were flaws in the cosmic design. In his philosophy, the raw, chaotic impulses of living things, hope, love, anger, distorted the pure order of existence. He wanted to erase them, and he believed the only way to do that was to unmake the universe and create a new one, more perfect one from scratch. A universe without what he called the incomplete soul. A universe where nothing could ever feel pain because nothing would ever feel at all. His obsession took him to the spear pillar, the ancient temple at the summit of Mount Coronet, where the veil between dimensions is thin. Dialga and Palkia slumber there, guardians of time and space. With the power of the Red Chain, a device forged from the late Guardians, Cyrus intended to force them to obey him. He would tear apart the existing cosmos and reshape it into a silent, empty cathedral of perfection. And on that day, he very nearly succeeded. The battle at the Spear Pillar was catastrophic. Dialga and Palkia were summoned, their forms lashing out as the Red Chain tightened its grip. The fabric of reality convulsed. The sky above Sinnoh cracked open, and those on the ground below felt a deep trembling in their bones. But what Cyrus did not expect, what no one could have predicted, was that the violence of his tampering would fracture something beyond even time and space. It broke the boundary between the normal world and the distortion world. In that moment of shattering, Giratina appeared, not as a distant myth or a hidden guardian, but as a living fury rising from the rift. It did not attack Dialga or Palkia. It did not attempt to destroy Cyrus. Instead, the Renegade Pokémon did something far more deliberate. It seized Cyrus, the man who had ripped open its realm, and dragged him bodily into the distortion world. Why did Giratina make that choice? There is no official record of Giratina's intention, but the act speaks volumes. Giratina is not a mindless force. It is an intelligent being, exiled and angry, but also patient. It understood that Cyrus was the source of the disruption. To destroy him would have been simple, but in Giratina's eyes, Cyrus had committed a deeper violation. He had tried to control the very forces that Giratina itself was born to stabilize. The distortion world is Giratina's domain. It is the only place where it can exist in its true power, its origin form. By dragging Cyrus there, it was not merely punishing him, it was demonstrating the absolute futility of his ambitions. In that upside-down world of floating islands and falling water, Cyrus could not command. He could only fall, and fall he did. The player character, aided by the legendary Cynthia, followed the rift into the distortion world, navigating its impossible terrain to confront Cyrus one last time. But by then, the damage was done. The boundary had been shattered, and the echoes of that crack would reverberate for years. They would eventually reach the ancient past of Hisui, where another man, Volo, would seek to open a similar rift. Giratina had shown its hand, and the rest of the world would never forget the power it possessed. What this means is that Giratina is not simply a creature of exile, it is a warden. So the question that lingers after the Platinum incident is this: if Giratina chose not to destroy Cyrus, could it be that its violence is conditional? And if so, what condition triggers its wrath? The answer may lie in a shadow that stretches across time itself, a renegade shadow that falls not on the world, but on the very idea of control. That will be our story in the next chapter. Cyrus stood on the precipice of nothingness, his hands reaching for a world without spirit, without heart. But when he tore open the boundary between realities, he didn't summon a blank canvas. He woke something older than his ambition, something that had been watching from the other side of the mirror since before time had a name, and that something had a title, one that echoes through Sinnoh's oldest texts and the quietest corners of its libraries: the Renegade Pokémon. To understand what that title really means, we have to set aside the common image of a villain. A renegade is not simply evil by nature. A renegade is one who has broken away from an established system. It is a rebel, a defector, a being whose very existence challenges the order that cast it out. And in the mythology of Sinnoh, no creature fits that description more perfectly than Giratina. It was not born malevolent. It was not designed to be the enemy of Dialga and Palkia. It was, according to the oldest legends, part of the same creation, a triune foundation for reality. But something went wrong. Or perhaps something went too right. The texts that survive in the Kanalav library speak of a shadow that looks back. This is the hidden lore, the fragment most travelers never find, buried among dusty scrolls and faded ink. The shadow that looks back, that phrase, is not a metaphor. It refers to Giratina as the negative image of existence. In the Distortion world, you do not simply walk forward. You realize that space itself is an illusion, and there, in the inverted geography, if you turn around too quickly, you might catch a glimpse of something watching from the corner of your vision, your own silhouette. But moving a fraction of a second ahead of you, the shadow that looks back is the thing that humanity has always feared the presence of an uninvited witness, a being that exists exactly one step behind the world we know. This fear is ancient, universal. Every culture has a version of the exiled god, the fallen angel, the titan cast into the underworld. In Christian mythology, Lucifer was once the light bearer, the most beautiful of angels, until pride, or perhaps an incompatible nature, led to his expulsion. He became the shadow that looks back from the pit. In Greek stories, Hades did not fall so much as he was assigned the realm of the dead, a cold duty that made him the god whom no one wished to invoke, the unseen king beneath the earth. And then there is Typhon, the monstrous storm giant, a being of such raw, chaotic power that Zeus had to bury him under Mount Etna, where his rage still shaking the ground. Each of these figures represents a force that the established order could not contain, could not integrate, so it drove them away. Giratina belongs to that same family of exile. It was banished, not because it was evil, but because its nature was distortion itself, where Dialga maintains the steady flow of cause and effect, where Palkia stretches the fabric of 3 dimensions. Giratina is the crack in that fabric, the place where laws break down, the antithesis of consistency. And in a universe built on order, such a being cannot remain at the center. It must be pushed to the edges, and from those edges it watches. This watching is not passive. The people of Sinnoh have known for generations that the Distortion world is not a sealed prison. It is a permeable boundary, and Giratina's presence seeps into the dreams of those who live nearby, especially in the areas around Mount Coronet and the lakes where the legendary trio of Uxie, Mesprit and Azelf rest, ancient healers in old Jubilife village. Before it became the city it is today, recorded accounts of patients waking in terror, describing a place where the floor was the ceiling and the sky was a river of broken glass. They called these nightmares the reverse dreams, and they believed that if you dreamed too deeply of that world, you might never find your way back. Modern psychology might dismiss such beliefs as folklore, but the law of the waking world's anxiety. But in Sinnoh, these nightmares are mapped. They follow predictable patterns. They occur in clusters around times of dimensional instability, like during the space-time rift that would later tear over Hisui. Giratina does not need to speak to communicate. Its realm distorts the minds that brush against it. The shadow that looks back is not just a vision. It is a warning, a reminder that the boundary between our world and the Distortion world is thinner than we assume, and that is the heart of the title, Renegade. Giratina is not simply a monster to be defeated. It is a symbol of what happens when power cannot be reconciled with order. It is the cosmic outcast, and like all exiles, it holds a kind of terrible grace. It does not ask to be understood. It demands only that you acknowledge its existence. This is the same force that rose from the Distortion world in Platinum, not to destroy Cyrus, but to correct the imbalance he had created. It acted not out of malice, but out of instinct. A renegade may break the rules, but it still remembers why the rules exist. In the oldest layers of Sinnoh myth, before Arceus was fully defined as the creator, there was a story of a mirror that cracked. The pieces of that mirror became Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, but while 2 of them reflected the light of order, the third reflected the light of everything else, the gaps between moments, the spaces between stars, the weight of a thought that has not yet been born. That third piece is the shadow that looks back, and it still awaits something, perhaps a key, a catalyst, an object that can bridge the gap between exile and return. The stories call it the Canalaviv Librarians, whisper about mention an artifact from the Distortion world, a stone that holds the shape of Giratina's true form, an orb that is not of this earth. They call it the Griseous Orb, but they have never seen one. They only know that it was lost, hidden, waiting. And if the shadow that looks back is ever to step forward, that orb will be the bridge. But that is a story for another night. But if Giratina is truly an exiled god, cast out for its violent nature, how does it ever manifest in our world with its full, terrifying power? The legends of Lucifer and Hades each carry their own symbols of authority. A crown, a scepter, a helm that commands the underworld. For Giratina, that symbol is the Griseous Orb, a relic so closely tied to its essence that without the Renegade Pokémon remains trapped in a form that is not truly its own. The orb itself is a paradox, a sphere of deep, cloudy grey that seems to shift between solid and liquid state, depending on the angle you view it. In the hands of a trainer, it feels unnervingly cold, as if it is drawing warmth from the air itself. Its surface is not smooth. It is covered in faint, swirling patterns that resemble the distortion of space seen in the Distortion world. Some researchers believe the orb is actually a fragment of that dimension, compressed and crystallized into a tangible object. Others argue it is a physical manifestation of Giratina's own antimatter essence, a piece of its being that it can project into the material plane. The history of this artifact is shrouded in the same myths that birthed the creation trio. According to the oldest Sinnoh texts, when Arceus banished Giratina to the Distortion world, the orb was not created separately. Instead, it was a part of Giratina's original form, a core of pure, unchained antimatter that could not coexist with the stable fabric of normal space. To prevent its presence from unraveling reality, Arceus sealed that raw power into a container, forging the Griseous Orb as both a prison and a key. In the Distortion world, Giratina could tap into its origin form freely, but in our world it required the orb to access even a fraction of that true shape. This is why the orb is so critical. Without it, Giratina is forced into its altered Forme, a hunched, serpentine shape that is more grounded, less ethereal. Its legs touch the ground, its wings are membranous and limited. This is the form of a being that has been shackled, shaped by exile into something that can exist within our laws of physics. But when the Griseous Orb is present, Giratina rises into its origin Forme, a floating, ghost-like entity with 6 glowing red rings that trail behind it like the tail of a comet. Its body becomes translucent, its movements fluid, and its connection to the Distortion world becomes direct. It can warp gravity, bend space, and even drag opponents into its own dimension. The orb is not a power-up, it is a restoration. But where does one find such an artifact? The orb is not a random artifact scattered across the world. It rests deep within Turnback Cave, a labyrinth of chaos located on one of the islands of the Sinnoh region. The cave's name is telling. It is a place where travellers often find themselves disoriented, unable to turn back the way they came. The interior shifts constantly, with rooms that seem to rearrange themselves based on the number of pillars you pass. Only by entering the cave with a clear purpose and an unwavering focus can you reach the deepest chamber, where the orb lies on a pedestal of black stone. The chemical composition of the Griseous Orb is unlike anything else in the Pokémon world. If you were to analyze it under a microscope, you would see no crystalline structure, no organic cells. Instead, you would observe a fluid of pure energy that exists in a state that physicists call negative matter, but with properties that defy classification. It is not antimatter in the strict particle sense. Rather, it is a medium through which distortion flows. The orb continuously emits a faint hum, a frequency that resonates with the Distortion world. Some sensitive Pokémon, particularly ghost types, can feel this hum from miles away. They are drawn to it, as if the orb is a beacon from the other side. Mystically, the orb is linked to the highest expressions of chaos and order. It is said to be one of the 3 treasures associated with the ancient Diamond and Pearl clans of Sinnoh. The Diamond clan revered Dialga and the Azure Flute, while the Pearl clan revered Palkia and the Lustrous Globe. But the 3rd treasure, the one connected to Giratina, is the Griseous Orb. This connection reveals that even in the most ancient times, the clans understood that Giratina was not simply a rogue god. It was a necessary component of cosmic balance, a force of anti-creation that prevented time and space from collapsing into a singularity. The orb was their way of acknowledging that even the banished god had its place. To exert its full influence on the material plane, Giratina must have the orb close at hand. In the lore of Pokémon Platinum, Cyrus attempted to use Dialga and Palkia to forge a new universe without spirit or heart, but he never sought the Griseous Orb, perhaps because he saw Giratina as a mere obstacle rather than a tool. Yet the orb is what allows Giratina to tear through the boundaries between dimensions. Without it, the Distortion world remains sealed off, a prison that cannot be breached from either side. The orb is the key that unlocks the lock, but only for the one who holds it. And that brings us to the deeper question. Why does Giratina need the orb at all? Could it not simply adapt to our world on its own? The answer lies in the very nature of its original Forme. That form is too unstable for normal reality. It would cause space-time fractures, reality leaks, and eventually a complete breakdown of physics wherever it walked. The orb acts as a stabilizer, filtering the raw antimatter into something that can be sustained for short periods. But even with the orb, Giratina's presence is taxing on the environment. Grass wilts, water ripples with dissonance, and the air tastes of ozone. The mystical connection between the orb and the Distortion world is so strong that some legendaries in the later eras have used similar artifacts to shift between forms. But for Giratina, the Griseous Orb is more than a tool. It is a fragment of hope, a shard of the Distortion world that it carries with it like a locket, a reminder of its exile and its power. When you hold the orb, you are holding a piece of the void that exists outside of time and space. So as you lie here in the quiet dark, consider the weight of such an artifact. A grey swirling sphere that cannot be opened, only held, is the key to understanding why Giratina's altered Forme is so different from its origin Forme. A transformation that is not just visual but elemental, and that difference, that split between two bodies, is what we will explore in the next chapter when we examine the origin Forme and the altered Forme side by side. Why does Giratina have two such distinct shapes, and what does each reveal about its soul? That is where our journey leads next. So we come to the Griseous Orb and what it truly unlocks. It does not simply empower Giratina, it unshackles it. This is the fundamental distinction between the creature that patrols the Distortion world in its full glory, the shadow that haunts the edges of our reality. The orb is a key, but the lock it opens is the very biology of the deity itself. It forces a confrontation between two states of being, the prisoner and the warden, the traveller and the true self. Consider the physical morphology of the altered form. In this state, shackled to the material world, Giratina possesses 6 legs. They are thick, armoured and clawed, segmented like an insect or a crustacean. These are not wings, they are anchors. They are built for traction against a surface that has gravity, for navigating a world with a defined up and down. It walks, it hunts. It is a dragon of the earth. Now contrast this explicitly with the origin Forme. Those 6 legs are replaced entirely by 6 ghostly streamers, rods of ethereal energy that trail behind a floating golden body. This is the biological significance of the Forme change. It is a complete redefinition of how the creature interacts with space. The legs are for pushing against the ground. The streamers are for pulling against the fabric of reality itself. The transition from a dragon-like terrestrial beast to a serpentine, ethereal leviathan, is a transition from a creature that resists physics to a creature that dictates it. This substitution of legs for streamers tells us everything about how the altered Forme represents a shackled or diminished version of the deity. It is not an upgrade, it is not a power-up. It is a suit of armour designed to survive a hostile environment. When Arceus banished Giratina, our universe became toxic to its true nature. To exist here, it had to calcify. It had to grow a shell that could withstand the pressure of linear time and defined space. The altered Forme is that shell. The hunched posture, the massive armoured plates, the red veins glowing like warning lights against its dark body. This is a creature in survival mode. It is a beautiful, terrifying prison of flesh and chitin. It is a deity forced to crawl because the very atmosphere of our reality burns its wings. The legs are not an evolution, they are a compromise. They are the cast of a broken god. When the Griseous Orb activates, or when Giratina returns to the Distortion world, that shell cracks open. The origin form strips the containment away. It stops being a beast of the earth and becomes a serpent of the void. The 6 streamers are not vestigial legs. They are conductors. They are sensory organs designed to perceive a dimension where orientation is meaningless. In the Distortion world, Giratina does not walk, it flows. It swims through the air as a leviathan swims through a deep ocean trench. The golden rings that encircle its body in this form are likely gravitational anchors, or perhaps the signatures of its absolute control over its environment. It stops having a front and a back. It stops having a top and a bottom. It is a ghost. The games have always codified this truth in its statistics, and the numbers tell the story of exile with perfect clarity. In the altered Forme, Giratina possesses a defensive profile that is absolutely staggering. Its base defense and special defense each sit at a staggering 120. It is one of the bulkiest legendary Pokémon in existence. Why? Because it has to be. It is living in a dimension that is constantly trying to crush it. Its body is a fortress built against the laws of the universe. However, the moment it shifts into the origin form, those defensive values drop. They are redistributed. Its base attack and special attack spike to 120 each. It trades its shield for a sword. The shift from defense to pure aggression reflects the deep truth of its biology. When it is exiled, it must endure. It must absorb the punishment of a world that rejects it. But when it is home, when it is in the Distortion world, it has no need to be patient. It has no need to weather the storm. It becomes the storm. The origin Forme is the hunter. The altered Forme is the hunted who survived. And yet this transformation raises a question that lingers like an echo in a stone chamber. If the origin form is its unshackled truth, if it represents pure aggression and absolute freedom, why does the Distortion world exist in the specific way that it does? Why is it a mirror? Why is it broken? Why did Arceus create a space so alien that it forces this exact biological duality? The answer is not simply punishment. The Distortion world is not just a cage. It is a specific environment with a specific function. We have seen how Giratina adapts to survive in our world, but we have not yet asked what the Distortion world itself requires of its ruler. That question leads us directly into the heart of the matter. It leads us to the very purpose of the reverse world itself. We have explored how Giratina's 2 forms represent the difference between its true unfettered state and the diminished, shackled version it takes when forced into our world. The altered Forme, with its 6 legs and armoured body, is a creature in exile, shaped by the constraints of a reality that was never meant to contain it. The origin form, drifting through the Distortion world on 6 ghostly streamers, is something far more fluid, more raw, more honest. But this raises a deeper question. If the Distortion world is where Giratina belongs, what is the purpose of that place? Why does it exist at all? The answer may lie in something far darker than mere banishment. Consider the relationship between our world and the reverse side of reality. In Pokémon Platinum, that the Distortion world is not simply a prison. It is a filter, a kind of cosmic purification system, operating beneath the surface of everything we know. When Team Galactic's experiments, Cyrus's ambition, the very act of trying to tear open a portal between dimensions, these actions disturb a delicate balance that most people never even realize exists. The theory goes like this. Our world, the normal universe of time and space, generates a kind of spiritual pollution. Every act of violence, every shattered ecosystem, every wound inflicted upon the natural order sends a ripple outward. In a purely physical universe, those ripples might dissipate. But here in the Pokémon cosmos, they collect, they accumulate. They stain the fabric of reality, and that stain cannot simply vanish. It needs somewhere to go. That somewhere is the distortion world. Think of it as the negative image of our planet. Every piece of degradation, every broken rule of nature, every distortion caused by human ambition or chaotic energy seeps through the cracks and ends up in this other dimension. And Giratina, whether it asked for this role or not, is the guardian of that filter. It does not create the pollution. It does not cause the damage, but it is left to its own devices. Giratina would likely remain in the depths of its realm, a silent entity drifting among impossible geometries. But because reality itself will not allow that, because the relationship between the two worlds is symbiotic, if one is damaged, the other suffers just as deeply. When Dialga and Palkia clashed in the movie Giratina and the Sky Warrior, their battle tore through the fabric, separating dimensions. The distortion world literally began to collapse. Black clouds, not of ordinary weather but of concentrated toxic miasma, rose from the depths. Gravity fractured, islands shattered, and fell into an abyss of nothing. Giratina did not attack because it was evil. It attacked because its home was being poisoned by the conflict. It was protecting a realm that had no other protector. So what is this toxic miasma that fills the distortion world? In the games, the visual is unmistakable. Thick, dark clouds that swirl like liquid poison in water. They are not decorative. They are the physical manifestation of everything that has gone wrong in the normal world. Every war, every act of cruelty, every environmental collapse leaves a residue, and that residue travels to the distortion world, where it congeals into these ominous clouds. Giratina does not purge them, it contains them. It cannot. Instead, it keeps them contained. It prevents them from spilling back into our reality. It is an unintentional environmental guardian of the multiverse. Consider the weight of that. The same being banished for its violent nature is now the only thing standing between us and the consequences of our own actions. The distortion world is not just a prison. It is a waste treatment plant for the soul of the world. And Giratina is the janitor, the warden, the last line of defense against a contamination that would otherwise consume everything. But there is a cost. Over millions of years, the accumulation of this spiritual garbage has made the distortion world ever more unstable. The black clouds grow thicker, the gravity becomes more erratic. The land itself seems to decay into something less solid. Giratina, in its origin form, can manage this only because it is attuned to the dimension. It can navigate the shifting corridors of chaos. It can breathe the miasma without being consumed. But for anything else, including human beings, prolonged exposure would be fatal. This is why Cyrus's plan was so reckless. He wanted to tear open a permanent bridge between worlds, to build a new universe without spirit or heart. But he did not understand what he was unsealing. By breaking the barrier, he risked releasing all that stored pollution back into the world. The distortion world, like a sponge saturated with poison, would have burst, and the very thing that made Giratina seem like a monster, its rage, its power, its otherness, would have been the only force capable of putting that flood back in its place. Look at the geography of the distortion world through this lens. The floating islands, the inverted waterfalls, the places where up and down lose meaning. These are not random. They are the scars of countless waves of distortion being absorbed and contained. Each area of the distortion world seems to correspond to a specific type of trauma from the real world. The thickest section, where colours drain to grey, might mirror a place where industry has choked the life from a landscape. The region where gravity pulls sideways cascades appear might represent a broken ecosystem, a river that once flowed freely now poisoned and reversed. Giratina does not separate these zones consciously. They are formed naturally, like sediment layering on the floor of a lake. And yet, despite all this, the world continues to exist. Our forests still grow. Our oceans still breathe. That is entirely because Giratina does its job. It never asked for the role. It never chose nothing. But it accepts the burden because perhaps It recognizes that allowing the miasma to return would destroy even the possibility of resolution. There is a deep sadness here. The distortion world is not a hell. It is a hospice, a place where the dying remnants of our mistakes are carried so that they can fade in silence rather than erupt in destruction. Giratina is not malicious. It is exhausted. It has been fighting a war without end, without thanks, without recognition from the very creatures it protects. When it lashes out, it is not because it enjoys destruction. It is because it has been driven to the edge of existence by the weight of what it must carry. The altered Forme, with its legs planted on the ground, is a creature trying to bear an impossible load. The origin form, floating free, is a spirit that can only truly act in its own domain. This understanding reframes everything we know about the renegade Pokémon. It is not a renegade because it defied order. It is a renegade because it was assigned a duty that isolates duty. It stands apart from Dialga and Palkia, not because it is inferior, but because its role is fundamentally different. They build. Giratina cleans up the mess. They create worlds. Giratina contains their destruction. And the next time the black clouds, swirling in the distortion world, we should remember what they represent. They are the sorrow of a universe that has not yet learned to heal itself. They are the price of every broken promise, every exhausted resource, every heart that turned away from compassion. And Giratina is there, the dark holding the line. But there is another chapter to this story, a chapter that takes the cosmic battle out of the distortion world and into the sky, a chapter where Giratina's rage meets its ancient enemies face to face, and where the true nature of its guardianship is tested in the open air. That chapter is called the 11th movie, Sky Warrior, and it is there that what happens when the filter finally breaks. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. If the distortion world is truly a filter, a kind of cosmic buffer absorbing the damage done to the real world, then what happens when that damage becomes too great? What happens when the pollution, the tearing of space and time, reaches a point where the reverse world can no longer contain it? That was the question the Pokémon world faced in the fall of 2008, not in the games, but on the silver screen. For the first time, the distortion world, or as the film called it, the reverse world, was shown to an audience far beyond those who had played Pokémon Platinum. And with that introduction came a new layer was added to Giratina's story, a layer that would forever change how fans saw the renegade Pokémon. The 11th Pokémon movie, Giratina and the Sky Warrior, opens not with a gentle introduction, but with chaos. We are thrown into a violent battle between Dialga and Palkia. Their fight that, to anyone familiar with the games, echoes the clash that tore through Alamos Town in the 10th movie. But here, the perspective is different. This time, we are not watching from Earth. We are watching from the reverse world, and the damage is real. The debris, the shattered fragments of reality, they rain down into this strange dimension where gravity has no master. It is a scene that immediately establishes the central conflict of the film. Giratina is not the aggressor. Giratina is the victim. Its home is being destroyed by the careless war of two gods, and it has had enough. This is a radical departure from the game lore, where Giratina is often described as violent, unstable, banished for its own nature. Here the anger is justified, the rage is reactive, and as the film progresses, something we had never seen before. Giratina communicating, not through some psychic roar or menacing growl, but through deliberate action, through intent. It chases Dialga across dimensions, but it does not simply want to stop the destruction. It is not mindless. It is not a monster trapped in a cage. It is a guardian defending its territory with a ferocity born of desperation. And then comes Shaymin, a small hedgehog-like Pokémon with a flower on its back. Shaymin is the unlikely bridge between Giratina and the human world. When Ash and his friends encounter Giratina in the reverse world, They do not find a mindless beast that attacks without reason. They find a creature that is wounded, both physically and emotionally. It is through this bond with Shaman that Giratina's softer side emerges. Shaman, with its ability to purify polluted air, becomes a symbol of the very filter the reverse world represents. And in a stunning moment, Giratina allows itself to be healed. It allows itself to be seen, not as a threat, but as a being that simply wants its home restored. The film humanizes Giratina in a way that no game ever could, by showing its pain, its frustration, its capacity for gratitude. The movie dismantles the idea that the Renegade Pokémon is nothing more than a force of destruction. It is a creature of exile, yes, but exile does not make one evil, it makes one lonely. And that loneliness is something the audience can feel in every scene, where Giratina floats through the shimmering, broken landscape of the reverse world. The reverse world itself, called the reverse world in the English dub, but essentially the distortion world, was a revelation for fans in 2008. The games had shown a grainy, low-resolution version of it in Pokémon Platinum, but the movie brought it to life with surreal, dreamlike beauty. Staircases that fold into themselves, islands that drift like clouds, waterfalls that run upward. It was a place that felt truly alien, a dimension where the rules of physics were merely suggestions. And it was here that Giratina was most at home. This was the first time a global audience truly understood what the distortion world was. A mirror of our own reality but twisted. A place where the pollution of human ambition, the scars of godly conflict, all accumulate in a silent waiting space. The conflict with Dialga and Palkia is not resolved with a single blow. Instead, the film shows a cycle of anger and misunderstanding. Giratina attacks Dialga. Dialga retaliates, Palkia intervenes, and the battle escalates. But it is only when Shaman and the human characters intervene that a truce is possible. In the end, Giratina does not destroy its rivals. It does not seek revenge. It simply wants peace. It wants the reverse world to be left alone. And in a quiet, poignant final scene, Giratina floating in its own realm, watching the real world from a distance, no longer in rage, but in something that resembles acceptance. This was the moment the Pokémon franchise evolved its storytelling. It showed that legendary Pokémon were not merely bosses to be caught, or obstacles to be overcome. They were characters with emotions, with histories, with families. They could be hurt, they could be helped, and they could change. For Giratina, the Sky Warrior film was its first chance to be understood, not feared, and it took that chance. It reached out, not with claws, but with a quiet, almost gentle presence, and asked to be seen. That bond with Shaman is especially important. Shaman, a Pokémon known for gratitude and for purifying the air, becomes the catalyst for Giratina's redemption in the eyes of the audience. When Giratina saves Shaman from a fall, when it allows Shaman to ride on its back, when it finally unleashes a powerful attack not out of anger, but to protect, a being that has never been given a chance to be good. The film asks us, what if Giratina was never evil, only ever violent because it was never given a reason not to be? What if its banishment was the cause of its bitterness, not the effect of its nature? This question lingers as the credits roll, and it prepares us for something deeper, because if Giratina can change, then what of its relationship with Dialga and Palkia? Are they truly enemies? Or are they three parts of a whole, each playing a role in the cosmic balance? That rivalry, that eternal conflict between time, space, and antimatter is something the games have only hinted at. But the film planted a seed. It suggested that the trio's conflict is not born of evil, but of misunderstanding, and that the distortion world, with all its strange beauty, might be the key to resolving a war that has raged since creation itself. Is exactly where our story must go next, into the heart of that rivalry, into the ancient struggle between the three gods of Sinnoh, and what it means for the world they all call home. The next chapter, the rivalry of the trio, will pull back the curtain on the relationship between Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, and reveal why their conflict is more than just a battle for power. It is a fight for the very definition of reality, and Giratina, the renegade, the exiled, the misunderstood, may hold the only answer, but that is a story for another time. For now, let the image of Giratina drifting through the reverse world at peace be the last thing you see as you drift off into your own dreams. The Sky Warrior showed us the violence of the rupture between the reverse world and our own. It portrayed Giratina as the wounded party, lashing out against the incursions of Dialga and Palkia, but that cinematic portrayal is just a snapshot of a conflict that has been raging since before the world was formed. To understand the rivalry of the trio, we must understand why Dialga and Palkia seem to fear Giratina more than they fear each other. The answer lies deep in the architecture of the creation myth. Dialga governs the flow of time, the rhythm of causality itself. Palkia governs the vast expanse of space, the infinite stage upon which time unfolds. They are opposites, yes, but they are codependent. They exist within the same fundamental framework of reality. When they fight, it is a war within the system. They can wound each other. They can block or invert each other's power. It is a rivalry of equals who speak the same language of existence. Giratina does not speak that language. It is the master of antimatter, the lord of the distortion world, the living embodiment of everything that breaks the rules of the universe. When Dialga and Palkia look at Giratina, they do not see a rival. They see the end of the very concepts that define their identity. A god of time cannot command the seconds in a place where time does not flow. A god of space cannot expand its reach into a realm where distance is meaningless. Against Giratina, they are rendered powerless. That is a fear far deeper than any competition. It is the terror of the infinite confronting its own limit. The historical records of the Sinnoh region, written on crumbling scrolls in the Canalav library and whispered in the stories of the oldest settlements, describe this tension with a precise, clinical term. They call it dimensional bleeding. It is the physical consequence of the creation trio clashing. Imagine the universe as a tightly woven membrane stretched thin by the hands of Dialga and Palkia. When their conflict generates friction, that membrane tears. It does not simply break open into an empty void. It bleeds. Energy from the distortion world seeps into our reality, infecting places with its strange gravity and silent geometry. At the same time, pieces of our world are sucked into the distortion world, lost forever to the floating islands and inverted physics of that forgotten realm. These events were not rare in the ancient world. The chronicles speak of days when the sun rose twice in the same hour, when lakes poured upward into the sky, and when the ground became a mirror reflecting a dark sky instead of the earth below. These were not independent anomalies. They were the symptoms of a deeper cosmic wound. The eternal tension between the masters of time, space, and antimatter had reached a breaking point, and the world suffered for it. Stone tablets unearthed from the deepest ruins describe villages vanishing entirely, swallowed by tears in the fabric of reality that refused to heal. The people of that age learned to respect the boundaries between dimensions. They understood that when the three powers clashed, the safest place was not in the middle, but far away from the thinnest point in the membrane. That thinnest point is the spear pillar. It stands at the summit of Mount Coronet, the very spine of the Sinnoh region. According to the oldest mythology, this mountain was the first structure shaped by Arceus from the chaos of the primordial world. The spear pillar is the roof of that sacred mountain, the point where the veil between the material world, the realm of time, the realm of space, and the distortion world is naturally at its most fragile. It is the focal point for the most dangerous energy in the universe. Why is it so dangerous? Because it acts as a nexus, a crossroads. When Dialga and Palkia are summoned there, they are not arriving at a neutral location. They are being dragged into direct contact, the most sensitive coordinate in all of reality. The friction generated between their powers is amplified by the thinness of the boundary. In the events of the Pokémon Platinum story, this is precisely what happens. Cyrus does not simply awaken Dialga and Palkia at the spear pillar. His ambition creates a catastrophe so immense, the foundation of reality cracks open. The distortion world bleeds directly into the spear pillar, and Giratina emerges not as a summoned ally, but as a force of nature responding to the violation of its domain. This is why Dialga and Palkia seem to fear Giratina more than they fear each other. A fight between time and space is a dispute within the House of Reality. A fight involving the distortion world is a threat to the house itself. Dialga and Palkia can lose to each other and still exist. Against Giratina, there is no guarantee that the concept of existence itself will survive. What the Sky Warrior movie captures beautifully is the personal nature of this conflict. It is not a cold, abstract war of cosmic principles. It is a grudge. Giratina was banished to the distortion world for its violent nature. It was cast out by Arceus, separated from its siblings, forced to inhabit a realm of broken physics and eternal silence. And yet, its siblings continue to disturb its exile. Every time Dialga and Palkia fight, they send shockwaves into the distortion world. They damage Giratina's home. They remind it of its abandonment. The rage that Giratina displays in the film is not the rage of a monster. It is the fury of an exile whose territory has been invaded by the very beings who locked it away. The rivalry of the trio is therefore a cycle. Dialga and Palkia govern the order of the universe. Their friction is natural, even necessary. But that friction bleeds into the distortion world. Every tier in reality is an attack on Giratina, and every attack on Giratina provokes a response. It defends its realm with a ferocity that time and space cannot fully counter. This keeps the three locked in an eternal tension, balance of fear, anger, and cosmic necessity. The spear pillar remains the center of this storm. It is the stage where the most dangerous energy in the universe gathers. It is the place where the boundary is weakest, where the three forces can touch each other directly. The ancient people knew this. They built their most sacred rituals around that site, not to summon the gods, but to appease them, to maintain the peace, to prevent the dimensional bleeding that could swallow their world. But the modern era, with its technology and its ambition, forgot those lessons. Cyrus did not understand the danger of drawing the three powers into such close proximity. He saw the spear pillar as a tool, a lever to force reality into a new shape. He did not see it for what it truly is, the focal point of a cosmic friction that has been smouldering since the dawn of time. This brings us to the deepest secret of the rivalry of the trio. The information we have gathered from the games, from the films, from the historical records. It tells us the what and the how. It tells us about the dimensional bleeding and the spear pillar, but it does not fully explain the why. Why was Giratina truly banished? Why was its nature so violent that it had to be separated from the others? Why does the eternal tension exist in the first place? The answers to these questions are not written in the modern scrolls. They are not revealed in the climax of the Platinum story. They are buried much deeper, in a time before the land was called Sinnoh, a time of ancient wars between gods and humans, a time of rifts in the sky that were not accidents but weapons. That hidden truth lies waiting in the volcanic ash and the endless snow of a forgotten age. The story of ancient Hisui holds the key to understanding the original sin that created the rivalry of the trio, a secret that changes everything we thought we knew about the Renegade Pokémon and its place in the cosmos. From that eternal tension between time, space, and antimatter, the three pillars of reality locked in an unending cosmic standoff, we now pull the timeline back, far back, to a world that has not yet heard the names Dialga and Palkia spoken by human tongues. We are going to the era of ancient Hisui, as it is not called Sinnoh, yet is called Hisui. And in this ancient land, before any modern settlement, before Jubilife City, before the great bridges and the galactic building, the story of Giratina took on a shape that has been nearly lost to history. But we are going to find it. This is a landscape of raw, untamed nature, snow-capped peaks, vast forests, and rivers that have never been charted. The people who live here are not the scientists or the trainers of the present. They are the clans, the Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan, and they have a very different understanding of the world. For them, every mountain, every lake, every storm is alive with spirit, and the great mountain at the center of everything, Mount Coronet, is not just a mountain, it is the spine of the world, the place where the heavens and the earth once met. They do not know about the distortion world. They do not know about antimatter, or alternate dimensions, or the name Giratina, but they know something is wrong. At the heart of the mountain, the elders speak of a shadow that moves through the rock, a presence that causes avalanches without wind, that makes the snow fall upward in certain valleys. They call it the Banished One, but they do not say that name aloud, not after dark. The Diamond Clan, who worship Dialga as the great Lord of Time, see this shadow as a fallen fragment, a piece of the past that was torn away and left to rot. The Pearl Clan, who honor Palkia as the master of space, interpret it differently. For them, the Banished One is a wound in the fabric of the world, a place where space itself has been folded wrong, and something ancient slipped through the tear. Neither clan fully understands what they are dealing with. They only know that when the space-time rift appears over Mount Coronet, the sky splits like a wound, and light pours out that is not sunlight, a pale, sickly glow that makes the stars go dark. The rift is not a gentle thing. It screams, not with sound, but with a pressure that sits in your bones. Every time it opens, the land trembles, the rivers reverse their course for a moment, and the Banished One stirs. The people of Hisui do not curse this being. They do not hate it. They fear it, certainly. But they also offer small prayers, leaving berries and woven charms at the foot of the mountain, hoping that whatever lives in the distortion will remain asleep, because they know that if it awakens fully, the world will tilt sideways. They have seen it happen. Grown men have wandered into certain caves and come out with their shadows pointing the wrong way. A child once threw a stone into a chasm and heard it fall upward for 3 days before the sound stopped. These stories are not legends, they are warnings, and the warnings all point to one truth. The Banished One is not evil, but it is not peaceful either. It is a force of distortion, a creature that exists in the space between the real and the unreal, and when that space bleeds into Hisui, nothing is safe. It is into this fragile, ancient world that a human ambition would finally tear the barrier wide open. Volo, a merchant who walks among the clans, a man with a smile that never quite reaches his eyes, has been studying the old texts, the carvings left by the first settlers. He has begun to suspect that the rift, the shadows, the Banished One, they are all connected to a greater truth the clans refuse to face. He has also begun to suspect that if he can control the Banished One, he can command the very powers that shaped the world. But Volo does not yet know what the distortion world truly is. He does not know that Giratina is not a weapon to be wielded, but a prisoner, and a prisoner that has grown very, very angry. That is the hidden truth of ancient Hisui, is that the Banished One was never meant to be forgotten. It was placed there deliberately by Arceus as a failsafe, a living lock on the boundaries of reality. Without Giratina, the universe would collapse into a single, endless moment of static moment. But the clans do not know that. They only know the terror of the rift and the cold dread that settles over the village when the sky begins again to bleed pale light. They call it the Sky Scar, and they know that one day someone will try to heal it or tear it open further, that someone is already walking among them. And that is where the next piece of this dark story begins. The man who tried to speak to the Banished One, who believed he could bend it to his will, a figure whose name would become synonymous with obsession and betrayal. We will meet him now in the next chapter, as the Volo Connection draws us deeper into the heart of the distortion world. In the ancient Hisui region, long before the Sinnoh we know existed, a man named Volo walked among the people as a travelling merchant, but his true nature was far darker than his friendly smile suggested. To understand Giratina's role in the crisis that nearly tore reality apart, We must first deconstruct the motivations of that merchant and his descent into madness. Volo was not merely a collector of rare artifacts or a purveyor of goods. He was a scholar of forbidden lore, obsessed with the myth of Arceus and the creation of the world. He believed he could stand before the Creator and claim its power, not as his own. And in pursuit of that goal, he formed a secret pact with the one being in the cosmos, who harbored a personal grudge against Arceus. The renegade Pokémon itself, Giratina. Why would a being of antimatter, an exiled god of distortion, agree to work with a mortal? The answer lies in the nature of betrayal. According to the old myths, Arceus banished Giratina to the distortion world for its violent tendencies, casting it out of the normal universe and into a realm of broken physics and eternal isolation. For eons, Giratina brooded in that dark reflection of reality, nursing its resentment against the Creator. When Volo came to its realm through a space-time rift, offering a chance to strike back at Arceus, Giratina saw an opportunity it could not refuse. Volo's descent into madness was gradual but inevitable. He began as a curious historian, but his search for the truth twisted into a toxic obsession. He discovered that his own bloodline was tied directly to the Sinnoh myths, that he was a descendant of those who once witnessed Arceus directly. That chilling revelation gave him a lineage most could only dream of, but it also burdened him with a sense of entitlement. He believed he alone was chosen to control the Creator's power, to reshape reality according to his own design. But such arrogance blinds a person to the cost of their ambitions. And here is the chilling revelation that lay at the heart of Volo's plot. His true lineage was not simply that of a mythic hero, but the blood of those who had tried and failed to challenge Arceus before. The very myths he studied were his own family history, a legacy of rebellion and defeat. Volo saw himself as the final inheritor of that legacy, the one who would succeed where his ancestors had not. But to do so, he needed a weapon of absolute destruction, a force that could match Arceus itself. And that weapon was Giratina. Why did Giratina agree to help a human? Because Volo's goal aligned with its own. He wanted to overthrow the Creator. Giratina wanted revenge and a chance to be free from its prison. Together, they would tear open the space-time rift, force Arceus to appear, and then seize its power. It was a partnership born of mutual hatred, sealed in the distortion world, where no natural law could interfere. And for a time and again, Volo used his knowledge of myths and his command of Giratina to manipulate events in Hisui, all while wearing the mask of a helpful merchant. He befriended the player character, shared history and wisdom, and all the while he was orchestrating the very crisis that threatened the region. The space-time rift was no accident, it was Volo's design. He used the influence of the distortion world and the power of Giratina to destabilize the boundary between dimensions, drawing Arceus out of hiding. And when the moment came, he stood before the Creator with Giratina at his side, demanding the universe bow to his will. But Volo's madness had one fatal flaw. He believed Giratina was a tool he could control. The renegade Pokémon, however, is no mere servant. It is a being of pure will and ancient fury, and once the pact was set in motion, it acted according to its own nature. Volo thought he was using Giratina to achieve his destiny, but in truth, he was merely a pawn in a much older conflict. The grudge between a banished god and its creator. The battle that followed at the Temple of Sinnoh was not just a human's fight for power. It was Giratina's final act of defiance, a storming the gates of heaven, and that confrontation would reveal just how deep the darkness of the distortion world truly runs. Volo's pact with Giratina was never a partnership of equals. It was a transaction built on resentment, and resentment has a way of boiling over when the stakes are highest. The merchant believed he had tamed the renegade Pokémon, that his centuries of study and his stolen fragments of Arceus's power would allow him to command a god. But he had forgotten the most essential truth about Giratina. It does not serve, it endures, it waits. And when the moment came for the final gambit, it was not Volo who was in control. The Temple of Sinnoh stands at the heart of Mount Coronet, a place where the fabric of reality is thinnest. In the ancient past of the ancient Hisui region, long before modern Sinnoh was named, that temple was a wound in the world. Dialga and Palkia had been dragged into conflict by human hands, their raw power spilling into the sky like bleeding light. But the true architect of chaos was not yet visible. Volo, standing before the altar with his last pieces of the azure flute, believed he had orchestrated everything. He summoned Giratina from the Distortion world to challenge Arceus itself. What happened next defied every expectation. The Renegade Pokémon emerged not in the familiar altered form, the grounded serpent of exile, but in its true shape, Origin Forme, a being of impossible geometry, its body trailing ribbons of anti-light, its 6 legs not limbs but anchors to a dimension where up and down ceased to matter. The air around it froze, and the temple stones began to drift upward, defying gravity, as if the Distortion world was bleeding into reality. Volo laughed, thinking the power was his to command. But Giratina did not attack Arceus. It turned on Volo first. This was the most difficult encounter in Pokémon history, not because of raw numbers or tight matchups, but because of what it revealed about Giratina's combat intelligence and tactical spite. The creature did not fight like a beast. It fought like a general who had spent millennia studying its enemies. Every move was deliberate. It would feint, pull back, shift its form, and strike from angles that should not exist. Volo's own Pokémon, a team built from ancient Hisuian stock, were torn apart one by one. The merchant screamed for Giratina to obey, but the only response was a silent, searing glare. And then came the third phase. The shock of Giratina's third phase is something few have described, and even fewer have survived to recount. It was not a new form in the way Origin Forme differs from altered. It was a state, a release. The shadows around Giratina deepened until they became absolute void, and from that void emerged wings, not limbs or eyes, but pressure, a gravitational pull that warped the temple's pillars into spirals. The air became thick with antimatter particles that erased colour and sound. Volo's own body began to flicker, as if he were being unmade. This was Giratina, shedding the last pretense of physical limitation. It had not been holding back in its earlier assaults. It had been toying, measuring, learning. Why did it choose this moment? Because Volo, in his arrogance, had attempted to bind it with a human-made artifact, a copy of the Red Chain. The insult was absolute. Giratina had been exiled by Arceus, forced to live in the Distortion world, a prison of perpetual inversion. It had endured the mockery of Dialga and Palkia, who deemed it too violent for the real world. And now this mortal, standing on stolen ground, tried to shackle it with a trinket. The third phase was the answer, a declaration that nothing, not gods, not humans, not even the laws of physics, could contain the Renegade Pokémon when it chose to be free. The battle raged until the temple itself began to collapse. Reality frayed at the edges, and the space-time rift above Hisui widened dangerously. In that chaos, Giratina made a choice that still puzzles historians. It did not kill Volo. It did not destroy the temple. It retreated, not in defeat but with purpose. It pulled itself back into the Distortion world, sealing the rift behind it with a deliberate, almost ceremonial slowness. The message was clear. It was not retreating in fear. It was choosing to watch over the world from the shadows. Why? Because Giratina understood something that Volo, and perhaps even Arceus, had forgotten. The balance between order and distortion cannot be maintained through destruction. If it had ended Volo, if it had shattered the temple entirely, the chaos might have spread beyond repair, but by withdrawing, it preserved the fragile equilibrium on its own terms. It became the silent guardian of the boundary, the sentinel no one asked for, but everyone needs. The Renegade Pokémon did not want to rule. It wanted to be left alone, to exist as the ultimate check against the arrogance of time and space. And so it waited, watching over the world without interference, until a new challenger would rise. But that is a story for another night. For what came next was not a battle of gods and mortals. but a quiet, unexpected shift, a redemption born not from forgiveness, but from an ancient wound finally allowed to heal. This is the chapter we call the redemption of the shadow. The dust had barely settled in the temple of Sinnoh. The echoes of that final furious clash between the player and Volo still seemed to hang in the ancient air. Long after the last Pokeball had been recalled, you had witnessed something that no modern trainer had ever seen. Giratina in its true, unrestrained form, not merely the altered form that appears in the modern day, but something closer to a primal force, a shadow given shape. And when the battle ended, the Renegade Pokémon did not vanish into the Distortion world. It simply waited. It stood there, in the luminous space, where the pillars held the memory of Arceus, and it watched you. That moment is the crux of everything we are about to explore, because it was there, in the aftermath of Volo's failed coup, that the player did something unprecedented. Instead of running, instead of sealing Giratina away, you chose to catch it, to trust it, to offer a bond where only exile and rage had existed before. And that single choice rippled backward and forward through time, reshaping the entire meaning of Giratina's story. To understand the redemption of the shadow, we have to go back to the very beginning, not to the moment of banishment. We have covered that in earlier chapters, but to the long, slow drift that followed. For eons, Giratina existed in the Distortion world as a creature entirely defined by its punishment. It was the exile, the violent one, the one whose very nature was considered too dangerous for the orderly universe Arceus had built. And for all that time, the only company it had was its own anger. The Distortion world is a prison, yes, but it is also a mirror. In that place where gravity bends and space folds in on itself, a being can see every part of its own soul, reflected and refracted. And what Giratina saw for millennia was a creature that had been rejected. That resentment grew, hardened, and became a singular purpose: to prove that it never should have been cast out, that the one cast out. But here is the nuance that the games, especially Platinum and Legends, Arceus, slowly reveal. Giratina was never purely evil. It was dangerous, yes, and its power was destabilizing. But its motives were always rooted in a raw, wounded sense of justice. Consider the events of the 11th movie, Giratina and the Sky Warrior. In that film, Giratina's anger was triggered when Dialga and Palkia's battle tore into the reverse world, damaging its home. It was not a random rampage. It was retaliation. It was a guardian defending the only territory it had left. And even then, in the end, it was capable of relenting, of cooperating with a human to restore balance. That film gave us the first hint that beneath the fury, a being capable of understanding consequence. Now fast forward to the ancient past of Hisui, to that climactic battle we just retread. The moment that truly sheer everything was not when you caught Giratina. It was slightly before that. It was when Giratina, in the middle of the fight, understood something fundamental. Volo had promised it revenge. He had promised to tear down the very order that had cast it out, and Giratina had agreed, because for so long destroying that order seemed like the only way to satisfy its bitterness. But then, in the heat of battle, watching you, a human who had no personal grudge, no desire for power, stand against it with nothing but courage and compassion, something shifted. Perhaps it saw that the world it wanted to destroy was also the world that contained beings like you. And more than that, it saw that the Distortion world itself was part of that same cosmos. If the universe were unmade, if Arceus were overthrown, the Distortion world would collapse too. There would be no home left, not even a prison. That was the moment Giratina realized that destroying the world would also destroy its own home. It had been so focused on the injustice of its exile that it forgot. Exile at least means there is a place to be exiled. To obliterate everything is to erase even the memory of where you came from. That realization was the first crack in the shell of rage. And when you threw that Pokeball, when you held out your hand to a creature that had known only rejection, you sealed that crack into a bridge. Giratina allowed itself to be caught, not because it was defeated, but because it was ready to see what trust felt like. This is the point where the players bond with Giratina in Legends. Arceus completely changes the context of the modern games. Because think about this, in Diamond and Pearl, and even in Platinum, Giratina appears as a wild, hostile legendary encountered deep in the Distortion world or in Turnback Cave. It fights you. It roidly, just another beast to subdue. But after Legends, Arceus, after you have known its past and its pain, that encounter in the modern era takes on a haunting new layer. That Giratina you face in the present day is the same creature you befriended in the past. It remembers you. It remembers the bond. So why does it fight you again? Because in the modern timeline, you are not the same person. You have not yet lived that ancient journey. The Giratina of the present is waiting for you to prove yourself once more, to show that you are still worthy of that trust. And that is a heartbreaking thought that gives every single Giratina encounter a tragic, beautiful weight. It is not testing your strength alone. It is testing your memory, your soul, whether you have remained the kind of human who once chose mercy over conquest. That leads us to what I call the second banishment. In the immediate aftermath of Hisui, after Volo was stopped, Giratina had a choice. It could have stayed, could have insisted on returning to the Distortion world, to be alone again, or it could have followed the player, remained bound to them through the ages. But as we know from the modern games, Giratina is once again sealed away in its own dimension, Distortion world. But is it truly a forced imprisonment this time, or did it choose to return there? That is the question the myth does not answer directly, but which the character arc leaves open with breach threads. Let me be specific. After the events of Legends, Arceus, the player likely kept Giratina with them for the rest of their life. But life in Hisui was short. When that human passed away, what became of Giratina? It could have raged against the loss. It could have lashed out, tried to tear open the world in grief. But instead, it seems to have returned to the Distortion world on its own accord. Not as a prisoner of Arceus, but as a guardian who accepted its role. It made a conscious decision. I will watch over this dimension, not because I am forced to, but because it is the only home I have left, and because the only way to protect the memory of the one who trusted me. That is the second banishment, a self-imposed exile chosen from wisdom, not punishment, and that changes Giratina from a victim into a silent protector. To trace arc, it begins as a vengeful exile, furious and hurt. It becomes a reluctant ally, fighting alongside a human who showed it kindness. And then, in the centuries that follow, it becomes something else entirely, a quiet guardian of the boundary between worlds. It no longer seeks to destroy. It does not even seek recognition. Its simple is there, a shadow in the, waiting for the moment when reality itself needs someone to hold the line. And that is redemption of a very specific kind. Not a bright, triumphant, heroic redemption, but a crepuscular one, a redemption drenched in twilight, where a being that was feared for its darkness, choosing to use that darkness to protect the world from the light, and from the void that could consume both. The question that remains, of course, is how does this new understanding of Giratina affect our perception of its very nature? What does it mean to be a ghost and a dragon? That typing has always felt like a curse, a combination that gives it weaknesses to dark, ice, dragon, fairy, ghost and more, while offering only a handful of resistances. But mechanically, it is also a typing that symbolizes something deeper. The ghost type itself is a contradiction, ghost and a dragon, a being of death, of what lingers after, of the unseen, and dragon, the most powerful, the most ancient of types. Together, they represent the permanent tension between the living and the dead, between the primordial and the spectral. And in the next chapter, we will explore that eerie curse. Why did the creators choose to give a banished god this particular pair of types? And what does it reveal about Giratina's role as the eternal threshold between existence and nothingness, ghost dragon? A cursed typing, a title that hints at something, that fateful combination and how it mirrors the tragedy of a creature that can never fully belong to any world, not even the one it was born to rule. And so we come to the very nature of what Giratina truly is. In the previous chapter, we watched the Renegade Pokémon make its final aching choice to stop itself from tearing apart the same fragile world that had exiled it. That redemption was born not out of sudden kindness, but out of a terrifying realization. The Distortion world was not a separate prison. It was woven into the fabric of the same reality. Destroy the normal world, and the Distortion world would collapse alongside it. But what does that say about Giratina's identity? Not just in its actions, but in its very essence. The typing that has cursed it from the beginning, ghost and dragon. At first glance, this combination feels like an oxymoron. A dragon is a creature of flesh, scale, and raw elemental power. A ghost is an echo, a memory-given form, something that exists only in the liminal spaces between life and death. To be both is to be a contradiction incarnate, and that is precisely the metaphysical weight that Giratina carries. It is not merely a dragon that happens to be ghostly. It is a primordial force of creation that exists in a state of living death, a spirit that never truly lived, and a dragon that never truly belongs to the world of the living. This typing makes Giratina utterly unique among the creation trio. Dialga is steel and dragon, a being of cold, unyielding time, armoured in the very permanence of metal. Palkia is water and dragon, a creature of flowing space, adaptable, fluid as the seas. But Giratina is ghost and dragon, a fusion of the intangible and the ancient, where Dialga's steel represents the rigid structure of causality, and Palkia's water embodies the endless expansion of dimensions. Giratina's ghost typing speaks to something far more unsettling, the idea that reality itself has a shadow, a reverse side, a space that exists outside the rules of matter. In being part ghost, Giratina is not just the ruler of the Distortion world, it is the Distortion world made flesh, or made unflesh. It is the embodiment of the very concept of distortion, of the absence where matter should be. But this typing carries a terrible irony. Being part ghost means Giratina is vulnerable to the very powers it wields. Ghost type moves, the spectral energies of other phantoms, and wound it deeply because they are of the same nature. And dragon moves, the raw elemental fury of draconic lineage, also strike with super effective force. Imagine a being that is not only vulnerable to its own kind, but to its very heritage. Every other ghost that haunts the world can harm it. Every dragon that roars across the sky can weaken it. This is not a weakness born of external opposition. It is a self-inflicted curse woven into its DNA. Giratina is, in a very real sense, allergic to itself. It is a creature that cannot escape the reflection of its own power. When another dragon unleashes Draco Meteor, Giratina feels the blow twice, once as a physical attack, and once as a reminder that it too is a dragon, yet stands apart from all other dragons. The ghost typing amplifies this isolation. It is a ghost even among ghosts, a spirit that cannot find solace among its own spectral brethren, because it is too ancient, too vast, too primordial to be understood by the wandering souls of mere Pokémon. And then there is Shadow Force. This is Giratina's signature move, the ultimate expression of its dual nature. Shadow Force allows Giratina to vanish completely from reality for an entire turn, not just hide, not just become invisible. It ceases to exist in any conventional sense. During that turn, Giratina retreats into the space between spaces, the void where even the Distortion world has no shape. It is a moment of pure negation. And then, on the next turn, it strikes from nowhere, seemingly from the very fabric of impossibility. This move is more than a battle tactic. It is a philosophical statement. Giratina can choose not to be. It can unmake its own presence in the world, if only for a heartbeat. No other Pokémon in the creation trio has this ability. Dialga cannot step outside of time, because time is its very being. Palkia cannot fold space around itself to disappear, because space is its skin. But Giratina, Ghost and Dragon can let go of existence entirely. It is the only one of the three that can touch the absolute zero of non-existence and return. Yet this power is also a reminder of its curse. Shadow Force requires a turn of preparation. In that time, Giratina is utterly vulnerable. If it could be hit, but it cannot, because it is not there. But the moment it returns, it is exposed. The move is a gamble of presence and absence, a rhythm of vanishing and appearing that mirrors the very cycle of death and return that ghost types embody. And because Shadow Force is a ghost type move, it is subject to the same vulnerability that plagues its user. If another ghost type Pokémon were to use a spectral attack on Giratina, the curse would run both ways. But Shadow Force, when it lands, is devastating, because it carries with it the weight of all the emptiness. So when we consider Giratina's typing, we are not looking at a simple game mechanic, we are looking at the signature of its exile. To be a ghost is to be a remnant, something that was once alive and is now only an echo. To be a dragon is to be a pinnacle of living power. The combination of the two creates a being that is both the pinnacle and the echo, a creature that has never been truly alive in the way we understand life, yet cannot be fully dead because it was never born. It is a fixed point of paradox, a frozen scream in the fabric of creation. This is why the other members of the creation trio seem to distance themselves from Giratina. Dialga and Palkia are comfortable in their elements. Giratina is uncomfortable in everything, including its own skin, or what passes for skin. And this leads us to a mystery that has haunted Sinnoh lore for over a decade. Deep in the Send-Off Spring area, there is a cave that leads nowhere and everywhere at once. It is a labyrinth of stone, cold and damp, where the walls seem to breathe, and where the rules of space begin to fray long before you reach the end. That cave holds the key to understanding why Giratina's typing is so cursed, and why the Distortion world exists as a separate plane at all. The answer lies not in Giratina's banishment, but in the very moment before it was banished. A moment that reveals the price of being the shadow of reality itself. That is the story that awaits us in the shadows of Turnback Cave. As given and so, we leave behind the cosmic implications of Giratina's ghost and dragon typing. The strange truth that it exists as both a spirit and a primordial serpent, a being of the afterlife and of raw, ancient power. That duality, that split between two worlds, is not just a matter of type chart calculations. It is a clue to the geography of the Sinnoh region itself, because there is a place in Sinnoh where the boundary between the living world and the Distortion world becomes thin enough to touch, a place called Turnback Cave. Most trainers will never find Turnback Cave. It is hidden in a remote corner of the region, accessible only through the Send-Off Spring, a pool of dark water that appears to lead nowhere. But if you navigate the spring correctly, if you know the path, you will emerge in a clearing surrounded by jagged cliffs, and there, carved into the rock, is the entrance to a cave that defies logic itself. The moment you step inside, the rules of the world begin to shift. Turnback Cave is not a simple dungeon. It is a labyrinth built on a single unspoken principle. That reality here is conditional. The cave is made up of several large chambers, each one identical to the last. Same pillars, same central structure, same eerie stillness. The only way to reach the heart of the cave is to solve a puzzle that the ancient builders of this place must have considered sacred. At the far end of every chamber stands a stone pillar. 3 pillars in total, to be precise, arranged in a triangle. To progress, you must touch these pillars in a specific order, but the order is not given to you. You must deduce it by trial and error, or you must know the sequence by heart. And here is where the mystery deepens. The sequence is not random. It is tied to the numbers 3, 7, and 30, numbers that appear again and again in Sinnoh's mythology. Why 3 pillars? Because 3 is the number of the creation trio. 3 legendary Pokémon that hold the fabric of reality together. 3 is also the number of fundamental forces in the ancient Sinnoh belief system. Time, space, and the distortion that lies between them. Why 7 is the number of days in the week, but also the number of floors in the spear pillar, where Dialga and Palkia are summoned, and 30. 30 might represent completeness in certain numerological traditions, but there is another interpretation. one rooted in the funeral rites of the ancient people who once lived near this cave. The Send-Off Spring, the pool that leads to which you must go to reach Turnback Cave, was not always a simple pond. In the era before the modern Sinnoh region, before Jubilifis City ever rose, that spring was a place of ritual. The ancient Hisuian people believed that the souls of the dead travelled through water to reach the afterlife. They would send their loved ones downstream, releasing remains into the current, and they believed that the spring led to the Distortion world, or to whatever their ancestors called the world beyond. The spring was a threshold, and Turnback Cave was the first step beyond. If you look at the architecture of the cave, the pillars, the tripartite arrangement, the need to follow a precise sequence, it begins to resemble a funerary chamber, a place where the living could attempt to contact the dead, or perhaps where the dead could return. The Distortion world is not just a prison for a violent god. It is a place where souls might linger, where the rules of life and death bend and break, where a ghost might find a home. And Giratina, as the ghost dragon of that world, will be both its guardian and its warden. Scholars of Pokémon mythology have long debated why Turnback Cave exists at all. Some argue it is a natural spatial anomaly, a weak point where the barrier between worlds is thin, like a spot on a wall that has worn away with time. Others believe it was constructed deliberately by ancient stoneworkers, following instructions given by a being beyond their understanding. What is certain is that the cave acts as a conduit. The Distortion world is not a separate universe entirely. It is a mirror, a reverse side, a dimension that overlays our own, but is slightly rotated so that most of the time. At Turnback Cave, that rotation aligns just enough for a traveller to slip through. But you cannot simply walk into the Distortion world. You must first pass through the heart of the cave, where the Griseous Orb, or its equivalent in ancient times, would allow Giratina to manifest. In modern times, we call that room the Cave of the Three Pillars. And once you have solved the puzzle, once you have touched them in the correct order, the central structure of the final chamber begins to glow. The air grows cold, the light bends, and you are given a glimpse of what lies beyond. It is a fascinating and eerily appropriate that the journey to meet the Renegade Pokémon begins with a funeral ritual, because Giratina, in its deepest nature, is the spirit of the world that mourns. It is the exile that grieves its lost home. It is the ghost that cannot move on. And that brings us to the question of what happens when a human being becomes obsessed with that world. When someone tries not just to visit the Distortion world, but to tear it open, to harness its power, to reshape reality into something they alone control. That human was Cyrus. The leader of Team Galactic did not stumble upon Turnback Cave by accident. He studied the ancient texts. He understood the mathematical nature of the pillars, the numb significance, and he knew that the Send-Off Spring was more than just a watery grave. In his hands, that knowledge became a weapon. But Cyrus's fate, what became of him after he stepped into the Distortion world, after he tried to seize control of Giratina's realm? That is a story for our next chapter, because the cave holds secrets, but it is nothing compared to the darkness that awaits within the Distortion world itself. And Cyrus, in his arrogance, was about to become its prisoner. From the depths of Turnback Cave, where the three pillars stood as silent sentinels and the mathematics of the ancient puzzle whispered of hidden doorways, we now step into something far stranger, because Turnback Cave was never just a puzzle to find Giratina. It was a threshold, a crack in the world that Cyrus himself would tear wide open. And that brings us to the final fate of the man who tried to unmake reality. Cyrus, leader of Team Galactic, stood at the edge of the Distortion world, not as a visitor, not as a curious explorer, but as a man who had finally found the place where his cold, empty philosophy made perfect sense. In Platinum, when the player chases him, he speaks lines that still echo with an unsettling quiet. He says, "In this world I see no turmoil, no strife, no sorrow, no fear, only perfect order. This is the world I have always longed for." He says this while floating in the void, The ground beneath him warped and shifting, and his voice carries no triumph. It carries the calm of a man who has ceased to be human. But what happened to Cyrus after that moment? The game shows him stepping backward, disappearing into the shimmering air, and the player escapes with Giratina. We never see his body. We never see his fate confirmed, and that ambiguity has haunted players for over a decade. There are three main theories, and each one is darker than the last. First, the simplest possibility. Cyrus is still alive, somewhere inside the Distortion world. The Distortion world is infinite. It has no fixed geometry as we understand it. Time flows differently, space loops back on itself, and gravity is a suggestion. If Cyrus survived the initial fall, he could be wandering those floating islands for eternity, never aging, never finding an exit, slowly losing the last shreds of his mind. But would that break him, or would it fulfill his desire? Because the Distortion world is exactly what he wanted. A place without the messy chaos of emotion and will, a place of absolute stillness. Second and more terrifying, Cyrus did not remain human. The Distortion world is not just a dimension, it is a living ecology. The walls breathe. The very fabric of reality there is composed of Giratina's own energy. If Cyrus stayed too long, he may have begun to merge with that environment, not as a ghost, not as a Pokémon, but as a fragment of the world itself. Some fans speculate that the flickering shadows in the background, the floating rocks that seem to pulse with consciousness, are traces of Cyrus. His consciousness diluted into the fabric of the Distortion world, still aware, still watching, but no longer able to act or speak, a prisoner of perfect stillness. Third, there is the Rainbow Rocket appearance. In Pokémon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, we meet Cyrus from another universe, a version of him from a timeline where Team Galactic succeeded. That Cyrus explains his obsession clearly. He wants to create a world without spirit, without will. A universe where everything follows a predetermined order, and he reveals that even after his apparent disappearance in the Distortion world, he has continued his research across dimensions. This suggests that the Distortion world did not destroy him. It gave him a window into the multiverse. He learned to travel between timelines, to observe other worlds, and to refine his plan. The Rainbow Rocket Cyrus is not the same as the Platinum Cyrus, but the implication is that the Distortion world became a hub for his multiversal obsession. So what do we truly happened to the original Cyrus? We can only speculate, but the eerie dialogue he gives in the Distortion world is not a farewell. It is a statement of intent. He says, "I will create a new world, even if it means I am the only one who lives there." And perhaps that is exactly what happened. Perhaps he did not die. Perhaps he became the Distortion world's only citizen, alone with infinite space and infinite silence, exactly as he wanted. But the story does not end with Cyrus's disappearance, because if you look closely at the structure of the lore, the 6 legendary Pokémon, the 6 pillars of the creation myth, the 6 directions of the Distortion world, you begin to see a pattern, a number that repeats again and again, hidden beneath the surface of every myth. That number is 6. And in the next chapter, we will explore what 6 truly means. The symbol that ties Cyrus's ambition, Giratina's exile, and the very shape of the Distortion world into one final revelation, the Symbolism of Six. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. We left Cyrus standing in the void of the Distortion world, his final words echoing in that shattered reality. If my heart could become as empty as this place, and then he vanished, disappeared into the very nothingness he had tried to master. But emptiness in the Distortion world is never truly empty. It teems with something else entirely, with patterns, with geometry, with the strange language of a being that exists entirely outside the normal flow of time and space. And if you look closely at that being, at Giratina itself, you notice anything in particular about its form? 6 wings, 6 ribs, or what appear to be ribs, and in its altered form 6 legs. 6. The number appears again and again, woven into every aspect of Giratina's design. The number has a weight that is impossible to ignore. The number 6 is not an accident. Game Freak pushed boundaries with Giratina in ways they rarely attempted, embedding layers of symbolic meaning into the design that go far beyond aesthetics. 6 is the number of imperfection in many traditions, the eyes of many ancient traditions, the number that falls short of 7, the number of divine completion. It is the mark of the incomplete, the broken, and in Giratina's case, it becomes almost impossible not to see the shadow of something darker. In popular culture, the number 6 repeated 3 times carries a specific association with the beast from the Book of Revelation. Now Pokémon is a franchise aimed at all ages. It always has been. But with Giratina, the developers deliberately chose a visual language that evokes that very imagery. 6 wings, 6 ribs, 6 legs. They were playing with fire. They were embedding a taboo into a creature that children would encounter during their journey through Sinnoh. The contrast becomes even more striking when you place Giratina alongside the other members of the creation trio. Dialga and Palkia are each associated with 3 distinct parts of their design. The 3 gems on their bodies, the 3 points of their armor, the trinity of power they represent. Time, space, and the will of Arceus. A holy trinity. And then there is Giratina. Instead of 3, we get 6. Instead of completion, we get doubling. Instead of the sacred, we get the hex. The word itself comes from the Greek for 6, and it carries a connotation of a curse, a spell, a mark of something that should not exist. Giratina is the hex of the creation trio, the cursed shadow that refuses to be neat and orderly, and the developers knew exactly what they were doing. They gave Giratina 6 full wings in its origin forme, each one ghostly and translucent, as though they belonged to ached with the weight of a fallen angel. 6 ribs, or rib-like appendages, jut from the body like an exposed skeleton, making it look less like a living creature and more like something that died long ago but refused to stay dead. 6 legs in its altered forme, each one ending in a claw that seems too long, too sharp for a simple earthbound being. This was not a design oversight. This was a deliberate choice to make Giratina feel wrong. Not just different, but fundamentally out of step with the rest of the world. The numerological significance of 666 cannot be ignored, and the internet fans latched onto this almost immediately upon seeing Giratina in Diamond and Pearl. They called it the Devil Pokémon, the beast of the Distortion world. But what is remarkable is that Game Freak did not shy away from the comparison. In Pokémon Platinum, when you battle Giratina within its own realm, the music is not heroic, it is haunting. It is mournful. Sounds like a requiem for something that was never loved. The developers leaned into the darkness, refusing to whitewash their creation for the sake of making it more marketable. And that is what makes Giratina endure. It was not designed as a villain in the conventional sense. It was designed as a symbol of exile, of the number that is not quite right, of the beast that waits beyond the boundary of reality. When you see those 6 wings stretch open in the Distortion world, you are not just seeing a Pokémon, you are seeing a story told in numbers. A story about imperfection, about the space left over when creation itself is divided into 3. The number 6 is the remainder of a universe that could not be neatly contained. And yet, despite all this weight, Giratina has also appeared in places that feel almost lighthearted by comparison. The trading card game, spin-off titles, and other media where its symbolism is often softened or reframed for different audiences. That story is coming next. But for now, let the image of those 6 wings linger. The mark of the Renegade, the signature of the exile, the hex that made Giratina unforgettable. The number 6, as we saw in the previous chapter, is woven into Giratina's design like a secret code. 6 wings, 6 ribs, 6 legs, a subtle echo of something ancient and unsettling. And that pattern of 6 carries over into another realm entirely. The world of the trading game and the spin-off video games. Here, Giratina's presence is not just a matter of statistics or flavor text. It becomes something you can hold in your hands or encounter in a dungeon's deepest shadow, and the card art in particular as a way of capturing the Distortion world's warped reality unlike anything else. Take, for example, the iconic Giratina EX from the Platinum era of the TCG. The artwork does not simply show a monster in a dark cave. It shows a creature that seems to be pulling the fabric of space itself into jagged, angular folds. The background is not a landscape. It is a contradiction. Gravity tilts sideways. Shards of rock float in mid-air like frozen shrapnel, and Giratina's origin Forme stretches across the frame. Its body composed of translucent red and black bands that look less like flesh and more like a rip in the canvas of reality. The artist, often credited as one of the few who truly understood the Distortion world, painted the scene so that your eye cannot find a stable horizon. You are forced to feel the same disorientation that Cyrus felt when he stepped into that inverted plane. Every card that depicts Giratina in its true home, whether it is the alternate art from Lost Thunder or the full art version from Cosmic Eclipse, tries to recreate that sense of a world where upended, the sky is not above, the ground is not below, everything is a question mark. And that art did not just appear in booster packs. It also appeared in the video game spin-offs, and none more fitting than Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Sky. Here Giratina is not a random encounter. It is the guardian of the world's abyss. The game's story brings you to a place called the Deepest Dark Pit, a location that mirrors the Distortion world in all its eerie glory. The gravity is strange, the floor is unstable, and at the very bottom, Giratina waits not as a villain, but as a gatekeeper. In the lore of Mystery Dungeon, Giratina is said to protect the boundary between the world of light and the world of shadow. It does not attack out of malice. It attacks because you have trespassed into a place where even time and space lose their meaning. The battle music shifts into a low, ominous drone, and Giratina's origin form hovers in the center of the chamber, its 6 wings beating like the pulse of a dying star. For players who grew up with a keen eye, the layout of the dungeon itself mirrors the number 6. 6 floors, 6 branching paths, 6 chambers before the final confrontation. The symbolism is not accidental. It is a deliberate echo of the same numerological pattern we discussed earlier, and when you finally defeat it, Giratina does not vanish. It simply retreats deeper into the void, because the abyss has no end. It only has guardians. But Mystery Dungeon is not the only spin-off that treats Giratina as a final boss tier threat. Consider Super Smash Bros. Brawl and its sequel, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. In these games, Giratina appears as a stage hazard on the Spear Pillar stage, and it is one of the most terrifying hazards in the entire series. The stage itself is a floating platform above the Sinnoh ruins, and the background features Dialga, Palkia, and sometimes Giratina. But Giratina is not a passive decoration. When Giratina emerges, the entire stage warps, the camera tilts, gravity reverses. Players who are not careful get launched upward into a blast zone because the floor suddenly becomes the sky. It is a moment of pure chaos, and it perfectly captures the Distortion world's central theme. Reality is not a fixed point. It is a fragile illusion, and Giratina is the one who reminds you of that fragility. In Smash, the creature does not directly attack you most of the time. It simply changes the rules of the game, and that is more frightening than any direct assault, because you cannot fight a rule, you can only survive it. That same sense of overwhelming, rules-breaking power appears in almost every spin-off that features Giratina. In Pokémon Ranger, Shadows of Almia, it is a secret boss that requires you to capture an entire army of wild Pokémon just to weaken it. In Pokémon Conquest, it appears as a legendary Pokémon that can only be encountered in a specific story path, and its stats are so high that it can wipe out an entire army in a single move. In Pokken Tournament, it is a support Pokémon that literally distorts the arena, making your opponent's attacks miss or directional inputs reverse at random. Every appearance reinforces the same idea. Giratina is not just another legendary, it is a force that bends the world around it, a living contradiction that exists outside the normal rules of the games it appears in, and that is why it always feels like a final boss. Even when it is not the final boss of the story, it carries the weight of a cosmic exile, and every spin-off knows that weight. But perhaps the most telling detail comes from the card game itself. Look at the Giratina Vistar from the Silver Tempest expansion. The full art version shows Giratina emerging from a rift that looks like shattered glass. The Distortion world is not just behind it. It is bleeding through the cracks. The colours are inverted, the shadows are glowing, and the creature itself is in altered forme. But its wings are spread in a way that suggests both menace and sorrow. It is not attacking, it is simply existing, and that existence is enough to break the world around it. That is the core of Giratina's portrayal in every medium outside the main games. It is not a monster that needs to be defeated, it is a reality that needs to be survived. And that leads us naturally to the question that has haunted players for nearly 2 decades. What exactly is the Distortion world? We have seen its art. We have walked its floating corridors in Platinum. We have felt its gravity twist in Smash. But the science behind it, the physics of antimatter, the geometry of a space that does not follow Euclidean rules, remains largely unexplored in the games. That is what the next chapter will attempt to unravel. The science of the Distortion world is not a dry lecture. It is a journey into the same mystery that makes Giratina so unforgettable, a mystery that, as we have seen tonight, is painted into every card and programmed into every spin-off, waiting for you to look just a little closer. There is a strange irony in the way the Distortion world is portrayed in its TCG artwork. Those swirling, impossible landscapes where light itself seems to bend sideways mirrors a concept that serious physicists have been wrestling with for decades. You see the portals on those cards, the way the worlds open to reveal something endlessly deep and grey, and you might think it is pure fantasy, but the mathematics of our own universe suggests that such a place may be more than metaphor. In the real world, theoretical physics has given us something called string theory. It is not one single theory, but a family of ideas that try to explain the fundamental building blocks of everything. At its heart, string theory proposes that the smallest particles are not tiny dots but vibrating strands of energy, and for those vibrations to make sense, mathematically, the universe must have more than the 3 dimensions of space and one of time that we experience. Some versions call for 10 dimensions, others for 11. Most of those dimensions are curled up so tightly that we cannot perceive them. But they are there, influencing reality at the deepest level. Then there is M theory, an even broader framework that unifies all versions of string theory. In M theory, our entire universe could be a kind of membrane, a brain, as physicists call it, floating in a higher dimensional space called the bulk. Other brains, other universes, could exist right next to ours, separated by a gap so small that we cannot touch them, yet so vast that they are completely invisible. This is brain cosmology, the idea that scientists have seriously considered. 2 universes living side by side, almost adjacent, but each obeying its own rules. One universe may have time flowing forward, another might have gravity reversed, and if something ever tore the barrier between them, you would get a collision of realities. Now consider the Distortion world. It is not a random void. It is a place where our rules of space and time do not apply. Gravity shifts without warning. Landmasses float in defiance of pull. Directions become meaningless. In Pokémon Platinum, Cyrus tears open the boundary between the normal world and the Distortion world. And what spills out is a realm that looks almost like a photographic negative of our own. The ground is a strange organic lattice. The sky is not sky. It is a pale, featureless glow with no sun, no stars, no source of light that you can locate. Everything is illuminated by a colourless, ambient radiance that seems to come from the fabric of the dimension itself. Why the world itself? Why does the Distortion world lack a traditional sun? because light as we understand it requires a medium, photons traveling through space-time, moving through a stable vacuum. In a dimension where space itself is distorted, the very idea of a single distant light source becomes impossible. The illumination of that realm is intrinsic, a property of the distorted geometry. It is like asking where the light comes from in a Mobius strip. It does not come from anywhere. It is just there, because the shape of the space itself allows it. This brings us to the role of matter and antimatter in the creation of the Pokémon universe. In real cosmology, one of the great mysteries is why the universe is made almost entirely of matter, when the Big Bang should have produced equal amounts of matter and antimatter. If they were equal, they would have annihilated each other completely, leaving only pure energy. But somewhere in the early moments, a tiny asymmetry tipped the balance, leaving behind the surplus matter that became stars, planets, and everything we see. That asymmetry is called CP violation, and it is one of the most fundamental puzzles in physics. In the Sinnoh myth cycle, Giratina is often associated with antimatter, and Dialga and Palkia with time and space. But the symbolism runs deeper. If Dialga and Palkia represent the symmetrical, creative forces that built the observable universe, then Giratina represents the asymmetry, the leftover, the imbalance, the part that could not fit into the normal order. Arceus did not banish Giratina out of cruelty. Giratina was the excess, the unstable piece that, if left in the main universe, would have annihilated everything. The Distortion world is not a prison. It is a containment realm. It is the place where the antimatter side of reality could exist without destroying the matter side. They are two brains separated by a thin barrier, and Giratina is the guardian of that separation. Yet in Pokémon Platinum, Cyrus tries to break that barrier. He uses Dialga and Palkia to tear open a rift, and what emerges is not a cataclysm of annihilation, but Giratina itself, the Distortion world. The distortion bursts forth through the crack, and suddenly you are walking in place that is the mirror of home, the same, yet reversed, like a universe made of the other kind of stuff, where the sun never rises because it would not make sense for it to set. All of this gives a new weight to the ancient lore that you will find encoded in the oldest and most obscure ruins of the Sinnoh region. Buried beneath Mount Coronet, there is a site that predates even the Hisui settlements, the Sinjoh ruins, where the true geometry of creation was once understood in ways that modern science is only beginning to glimpse. And in those ruins, you might find the answer to why the Distortion world is the shape it is, and what Giratina truly protects. But that story, the secrets of the Sinjoh ruins, is something we will have to save for another chapter, because the night is long, and this mystery still has many layers to peel away. We've spent the last chapter navigating the strange physics of the Distortion world, where gravity folds in on itself, and two universes might be separated by nothing more than a trembling membrane. That idea, brain cosmology, is one way to imagine how a prison dimension could exist just outside our perception, a realm where an antimatter god was exiled for being too violent. But if you don't need to understand string theory to feel the weight of Sinnoh's mythology, you just need to follow the path that connects two regions, two cultures, and a single, hushed ritual hidden in the snow. That ritual takes place at the Sinjoh ruins, a place that is almost never mentioned in the games, a ghost of a location that only becomes accessible if you bring the right Pokémon from the right generation. In Pokémon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you can transfer an Arceus from the Generation Orvi Sinnoh games, travel to a remote corner of Yoto, and trigger an event that is equal parts sacred and unsettling. The ruins themselves are carved with Pictish spirals and standing stones, older than any known civilization in either Johto or Sinnoh. And when you step inside with Arceus in your party, the floor opens a passage that leads not into a dungeon, but into a temple, but into a hall where the air itself seems to hold its breath. Here the game does something it rarely does. It shows you the origin of the creation trio, not through text or cutscene, but through a visual sequence that pulls your own reality into the story. As you participate in the ritual, the screen flickers. Real-world photographs of space, of nebulous, of the swirling birth of stars begin to appear overlaid on the game's own graphics. You see the as you watch. Giratina materializes from this cosmic storm, not as a sprite, but as a being born from the same flurry of real photographs that accompanied the hatching of Dialga and Palkia. It is as if the game is telling you that these Pokémon are not just fictional creatures. They are symbols, echoes of the actual forces that shape our universe. And then, after the light fades, you are left holding a new egg. Arceus has just created a new life in front of you. A fresh Dialga, Palkia or Giratina, depending on your choice. The egg is warm, the egg is heavy, and there is something deeply unsettling about the casualness of the creation ceremony. Arceus does not speak. The ruins do not whisper. There is no fanfare, no music swell. Just the quiet click of the game's menu asking if you want to take the egg. It treats the birth of a god as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And perhaps that is not the most terrifying part? That Arceus can produce a new member of the creation trio as easily as you might pluck a berry from a tree. It implies that the Distortion world and its master are not unique, that they are part of an endless cycle of generation and banishment. The Sinjoh ruins do more than just a crossover event. They are a bridge between Johto's ancient history and Sinnoh's mythic geography. The patterns carved into the stone are identical, so those ruins match the markings found in the Hall of Origin, the place where Arceus was said to have been born. This suggests that the civilization that built the Sinjoh ruins knew something that modern researchers have forgotten, that the creation trio did not originate in Sinnoh alone, but that there was a shared understanding of these beings across the continent. Perhaps the people of ancient Johto and ancient Sinnoh were the same culture or maintained contact across the sea. Maybe the ruins were a neutral ground, a temple where pilgrims from both lands could witness the rebirth of time, space, and distortion. And if you look at it from Giratina's perspective, the ruins become even more unsettling. When you choose to receive the egg of Giratina at Sinjoh, you are literally taking that human has decided to raise an exile. You are taking a creature that was cast out for its rage. A creature that was born again in Crater of Photographs and Light, and now you are carrying it into your world. The Distortion world never appears in Johto. There is no portal to Turnback Cave. The shiners of that region have no memory of antimatter, but you are bringing the Distortion to them, one quiet egg at a time. That is the secret covenant sealed in the snow of the Sinjoh ruins. That the boundaries between worlds are not as fixed as the ancient banishments would have you believe. The ruins may be silent now, their halls empty of any but the faithful player, but they carry a memory that spans millennia. Every time someone brings Arceus to that shrine, the cycle repeats, and the egg that hatches knows exactly what it is: a creature of memory and banishment, a being that will always be one step away from the world of order. We will continue this investigation into the eerie, its even quieter echoes. In our next chapter, we enter that silence, the silence of the grave. The Sinjoh ruins left us with a chilling image: Arceus standing silent at the center of a forgotten temple, creating a newborn egg from nothing. The ritual felt almost sacrilegious, a glimpse into the raw mechanics of creation that normal eyes were never meant to see. But if that was the moment of birth, then what of the opposite? What of the moment when a soul leaves the body and drifts into the unknown? For every beginning, there must be an end. And in the world of Pokémon, that end is guarded by something far older and far more silent than any Grim Reaper. Exploring the connection between Giratina and the concept of the afterlife is not a matter of speculation for fan forums alone. It is woven into the very fabric of how the Distortion world is portrayed. When you step through the rift in Pokémon Platinum, you leave behind a world of color and sound. Green grass, blue sky, the chirping of wild Pokémon, and you enter a realm of perpetual twilight. The sky is a bruised purple. The ground floats in jagged, broken plates. Water falls upward, There are no wild Pokémon here, no signs of life, just emptiness and the echo of your own footsteps. It feels like a place where things go when they have no other place to go, and that is the first clue. What is purgatory after all? But a waiting room, a dimension where souls are held between worlds, unable to move on. The Distortion world mirrors that concept in every way. It exists outside of time and space, outside of Dialga's domain, outside of Palkia's. It is a place where the normal rules of reality do not apply, and where the dead might linger if they have unfinished business. This in the lore of the Giratina and the Sky Warrior film, where the reverse world becomes a sanctum for energies that have been violently displaced. It is not a hell, it is not a paradise, it is a silence. The question becomes, is the Distortion world a form of purgatory for Pokémon spirits? We have no official canon that says outright, yes, this is where Pokémon ghosts go, but the evidence builds quietly. Consider the locations where Giratina appears outside of its own dimension. In Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, Giratina can be found deep within Turnback Cave. The name itself is haunting. Turnback Cave, as if you should turn back before you go too far. The cave is located on a remote island off the coast of Sinnoh, shrouded in mist. And if you look at the maps, that island is very close to the Pokémon League and, more importantly, to the graveyard of the region, the Lost Tower. Why is Giratina often found near cemeteries and places of mourning? The answer lies in its nature as a guardian of the threshold. Giratina does not feed on death. It does not cause death, but it is drawn to the boundary between life and what comes after. In Pokémon Legends, Arceus Giratina emerging from a space-time rift that tears open the sky above Hisui. That rift is a wound between worlds, and Giratina is the keeper of the space between. So when a Pokémon dies, or when a human mourns, the veil grows thin, and the Renegade Pokémon drifts closer, not as a threat, but as a sentinel. This puts Giratina in a unique position among the so-called death Pokémon. We have Yveltal, the destruction Pokémon, whose very touch can drain the life from a forest. Yveltal is an ender, a bringer of oblivion. Then there is Necrozma, the light-eating entity from another dimension, which consumes worlds to sustain its own desperate hunger. Necrozma is a predator of energy, but Giratina is neither. The relationship between Giratina and other death Pokémon like Yveltal or Necrozma is one of contrast rather than competition. Yveltal ends life. Necrozma devours light. Giratina holds the space where souls pass through. It is not a reaper, it is a door, and doors are not good or evil. They simply stand, waiting to be opened. There is a subtlety in the mythology, that the games never state outright, but that the Distortion world itself whispers to those who wander too long. The silence of the grave is not an absence of sound, it is a presence, the hum of something watching from the other side. In the Distortion world, you hear your own breathing amplified. You hear the crunch of rock under your feet, but there is no wind, no bird call, no rustling grass. It is the most peaceful, most unsettling place in the entire Pokémon universe, and Giratina is its sole resident. That is not a coincidence. We should also consider the rituals that surround death in the real world. Many cultures believe that the spirit lingers for a time before moving on. In Sinnoh, the ancient people built the Solacean ruins, where unknown gather and where the inscriptions tell of a great power that dwells in the world's reverse side. Those ruins are not temples to Dialga or Palkia, they are monuments to the unknown, and near them you find the Lost Tower, a 7-story burial site, where trainers leave flowers and pay respects. It is no accident that Giratina's domain is closest to that region. The developers placed it there deliberately, as if to say, death is not the end, but a passage into a world that mirrors our own. So when you next encounter Giratina in the Distortion world, do not think of it as a monster to be captured. Think of it as a warden, a being that has been exiled, not because it is evil, but because it is too close to the truth. Arceus banished it to keep the boundaries intact, to prevent the living from seeing what lies beyond. And yet sometimes the boundary cracks. A grave is dug, a death is mourned, a rift opens, and Giratina is there, silent, waiting, watching. The silence of the grave is not emptiness, it is a presence. And that presence will lead us next into a labyrinth of fan theories that blur the line between fact and fiction, where the truth is buried so deep that even the unknown cannot read it. From the idea of the distortion world as a kind of purgatory, a place where spirits linger between worlds. It's only natural that fans have spent years trying to pin down exactly what this realm is, and what Giratina's true role might be. The silence of the grave, as we explored last time, is a heavy metaphor. But what happens when we step out of that silence and into the cacophony of community speculation? Every legendary Pokémon attracts theories, but Giratina, because of its association with antimatter, exile, and a dimension that literally breaks physics, might be the most theorized creature in the entire franchise. Let's begin with the biggest one. The idea that Giratina is the shadow of Arceus. It's a beautiful, almost poetic theory, that the creator of all things cannot exist without a shadow, and that shadow is the Renegade. On the surface, the evidence is compelling. In the myth cycle, Arceus creates Dialga and Palkia to govern time and space, and then creates Giratina to govern antimatter or distortion. But the word shadow implies something darker, a necessary opposite, a dark twin. Some fans point to the fact that Giratina's design, in its origin Forme, has 6 wings, 6 ribs and 6 legs, and that Arceus itself has a cross-like shape. The number 6, as we discussed earlier, carries heavy symbolism, and when you compare the two, Arceus as pure light, Giratina as writhing shadow, the duality feels intentional. The Pokémon Company has never explicitly called Giratina Arceus' shadow. In fact, the lore treats Giratina as one of the 3 children of Arceus, not as a dark reflection. However, there's a subtler truth here. In the game's coding and in some official Japanese materials, Giratina is referred to as the one who gave form to antimatter, while Arceus is the original one. They are not 2 sides of the same coin, in the way that, say, Xerneas and Yveltal are life and death. Instead, Giratina is more like the coin's edge, the place where the 2 sides meet and distort. I think the theory is beautiful, but it remains a theory. The fandom has shaped it into something more than what the games explicitly state. And that's part of the magic. Now, another theory, maybe even more imaginative, suggests that the distortion world is actually a destroyed future timeline. This one is fascinating because it plays with time travel, which of course is Dialga's domain. The idea goes like this. What if the distortion world is not a naturally occurring dimension, but the ruins of a universe that already collapsed? Some fans point to the strange geometry, the floating rocks, the way gravity seems to have broken, as if the world once had order and then was shattered. They connect this to Cyrus's plan in Pokémon Platinum, where he tries to create a new world without spirit. Could the distortion world be a failed version of that same ambition? A timeline where someone else, perhaps even Giratina itself, succeeded in unmaking reality, only to leave behind this twisted shell? There's actually a kernel of truth here. In the anime movie, Giratina and the Sky Warrior, the reverse world is damaged by the battles of Dialga and Palkia, and that damage is shown as scars, fractures in the fabric of that dimension. So the distortion world can be harmed. But is it a destroyed future? The games never say that. Pokémon Platinum treats it as a separate plane that has always existed as a mirror or reverse of the normal world. The theory is creative, and it adds a layer of tragedy, that Giratina might be guarding a graveyard of what could have been. But as hard evidence goes, it's more poetic than factual. The truth is, many of the most popular fan theories about Giratina are born from the gaps that the developers left on purpose. The distortion world is intentionally vague. It's a place that defies explanation, and Giratina itself is named the Renegade, a word that means one who rejects allegiance. That leaves room for us to fill in the blanks, and we have. The fandom has turned Giratina from a simple legendary into a symbol of loneliness, of misunderstood power, and of the horror of being cast out. That reception has not gone unnoticed by the Pokémon Company. Over the years, They have adjusted how they use Giratina. In the early days, it was almost purely antagonistic, a force to be caught or calmed. But with Pokémon Legends, Arceus, a version of Giratina that is more nuanced. It's still dangerous, but it has a history, a grudge, and even a tragic motive tied to its banishment. That shift mirrors the fanbase's desire to see Giratina as more than just a monster. We wanted depth, and they gave it to us. Films, trading card art, even the game's later dialogue all reflect a creature that is feared but also pitied. The Distortion world went from being a weird level to a mythical location, something that story writers now treat with reverence. And when we look ahead, we can see that the most important game for Giratina's identity, Pokémon Platinum, will always stand as the foundation. Its legacy is not just the Distortion world itself, but the way it allowed us to question reality. Platinum dared to show us a broken dimension, and that single idea has inspired everything we've talked about tonight. The theories, the symbolism, the science, the afterlife, and the shadow of Arceus. We've been sifting through secrets for 25 chapters, and we're about to turn the page to something that feels almost like a final chapter. We've spent these last chapters peeling back the layers of myth, science, and speculation surrounding the Renegade Pokémon. We've weighed the theory that Giratinius, the Shadow of Arceus theory, wondered whether the Distortion world holds the souls of the departed, and traced the ancient rituals at the Sinjoh ruins. But all of that lore, all of that dark, tangled history, eventually flows from a single source, a single game that took everything fans thought they knew about Pokémon storytelling and turned it inside out. That game is Pokémon Platinum, and its legacy is far more than a third version with a few extra routes. It is the moment the franchise stopped being about collecting monsters and became about preventing the collapse of the multiverse. It is the moment a legendary Pokémon was no longer just a rare encounter at the end of a cave, but a living, breathing force of exile, rage, and cosmic balance. And at the heart of that shift is Giratina, to understand what changed. In Diamond and Pearl, the story of Sinnoh had depth. You chased Team Galactic, you met Dialga or Palkia, and you stopped Cyrus from remaking the world. But the narrative still felt, in many ways, like a grand escalation of the gym badge formula. The stakes were high, but the emotional and atmospheric weight was still building. Then came Platinum, and with it, the Distortion world. That environment alone rewrote the rules of what a Pokémon game could feel like. You step into the Distortion world, and the first thing you notice is the silence. The music shifts to something uneasy, almost mournful. The ground floats in jagged chunks. Gravity pulls you sideways, upside down, across impossible angles. There is no natural light. It feels less like a dungeon and more like a wound in reality. The game has taken you out of Sinnoh, out of the safe, familiar world of routes and towns, and dropped you into a place that exists only because something was torn open. You are not here to catch a Pokémon. You are here to stop a man from unraveling. And that is where Giratina's story begins to reshape the franchise's narrative depth. Until Platinum, the legendary Pokémon were usually presented as either forces of nature or ancient guardians. Ho-Oh-Kyoga, even Rayquaza, they were powerful, but their stories were self-contained. They belonged to their region. Giratina, on the other hand, belonged to a dimension that does not follow the rules of our world. Its presence implied a larger, more fragile cosmos. The creation trio of Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina were not just three strong Pokémon. They were the pillars of time, space, and antimatter. If one of them was banished, if one of them was angry, the entire structure of reality could tilt. That is a human. Cyrus could exploit that tilt, could actually break the boundary between dimensions. Was a profound leap for a Pokémon story. You were no longer just stopping a villain who wanted to use a legendary to control the region. You were stopping someone who wanted to erase the universe and start over. And the only way to stop him was to follow Giratina to confront him. Giratina could serve to spat you, carry away the false god, but it also could fight you. It was not a tool. It was a character had agency. It had rage. it balled up, and it retreated. This shift from collecting monsters to preventing the collapse of the multiverse did not happen overnight. It planted a seed that would grow into the grand, world-endangering plots of later generations. The distortion of time in black and white, the multiverse crisis of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and the space-time rifts of legends, Arceus. But Platinum was where that seed first cracked the soil. Why does Platinum remain a fan favorite for its mature and atmospheric storytelling? Because it treated the player, not only gave you a villain with a genuinely dark philosophy, but it also let you explore the emotional landscape of a Pokémon that had been cast out. Giratina is the most tragic of the creation trio. Dialga is the master of time, Palkia the ruler of space. Giratina is the exile. Its origin form, revealed only in the Distortion world, is more fluid, more ghost-like, more free. The altered Forme is the form it takes when constrained by the rules of the normal world. That distinction alone is a powerful storytelling tool. The game implies that Giratina's true self is too strange, too powerful for our reality. It had to be altered to exist here. The atmospheric weight carries into every corner of the game. The Distortion world is not just a level, it is a statement. It says, there are places that physics cannot explain. There are beings that hold grudges across boundaries of existence. And the game trusts you to feel that dread without spelling it out. That is why the Distortion world remains the franchise's most creative environment. No other region has attempted anything as surreal. Ultraspace came close, but its floating rocks and neon skies never reached the same eerie confusion of that slow floating maze where water falls upward, and you walk on walls while Cyrus's echoed speeches play in your head. The impact of Platinum on future games cannot be overstated. It taught Game Freak that players could handle deep lore, that they wanted to explore broken realities, that they cared about mythic themes. Exile, antimatter, cosmic balance could be woven into the same story that also had a little girl losing her Psyduck, the Tone. And it set a precedent for later games to treat legendary Pokémon as characters with motivations, not just prizes at the end of a high-level trail. Think about how many subsequent stories owe a debt to Platinum's legacy. In Black and White, Ghetsis exploits the Dragon of the Ideal and the Dragon of Truth, and you feel that same sense of cosmic consequences, injustice. In and Y, the ultimate weapon threatens all life. Not just the stakes again go beyond the region. The Distortion world showed us that the Pokémon universe was bigger than we thought, and that it could break. Now as we look ahead, we have to ask, what happens next? The Distortion world is still there. Giratina is still watching. And with the recent re-exploration of Hisui, with Volo's obsession with Arceus, with the space-time rifts that continue to open even in modern Sinnoh, the door has been left ajar. There are hints that the Distortion world may not be a static afterlife, but a living, growing realm. Some theories suggest it could even expand. If it does, what new secrets will emerge from its floating islands and reversed gravity? That is a story waiting to be told. And it will take us straight into the future of the Distortion world. The legacy of Platinum changed everything. It was the game that dared to show us a world beyond worlds, and in doing so, it cracked open the door to a multiverse that would only grow wider in later generations. When Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire introduced the concept of parallel universes through the Delta episode, they didn't just give us a new way to catch Rayquaza, they retroactively redefined Giratina's entire existence. Because if space itself can have infinite variations, then the Distortion world isn't a single place. It's a reflection that might exist in every branching timeline, every alternate cosmos, every fractured reality where the laws of physics bend or break. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, we learn that Hoenn and the rest of the Pokémon world are just one of many. There are universes where Primal Groudon and Kyogre clashed without Rayquaza's intervention. There are universes where Team Magma or Aqua succeeded. And if that's true, then every time Dialga and Palkia's battle shook the fabric of reality, they may have created more than just a single rift. They may have spawned multiple distortion worlds, each one a unique prison or reflection for Giratina. The distortion world we explored in Platinum could be just one of an infinite number of such realms, each tailored to the quirks of its parent universe. That idea is both unsettling and awe-inspiring. It suggests that Giratina is not a singular entity trapped in one place, but a constant across all realities, a ghost that haunts every shadow of creation. This multiversal framework opens up extraordinary possibilities for where Giratina might appear in future games. We've already seen its role expanded in Pokémon Legends Arceus, where Volo manipulated the Renegade Pokémon to tear open a space-time rift. That game proved that Giratina is willing to ally with humans when its anger or ambition aligns with theirs. So what about a future Legends title set in another region? Imagine a game set in Unova's ancient past, where the original dragons of truth and ideals once warred. Could Giratina have been involved in that schism? Or consider a Legends title set in Kalos, where the ultimate weapon was activated. The distortion world might overlap with a dimension where that weapon never stopped firing, creating a wasteland of eternal war. Giratina could emerge as both a consequence and a guardian of that devastation. And then there are the remakes, a potential Let's Go, Johto, or a true Sinnoh remake built on the Legends engine could bring us back to the distortion world with new depth. But the most thrilling possibility is a full revisit to Platinum's story, perhaps as a modern follow-up. The latest generation has shown a willingness to revisit older regions with new takes on their myths. If we ever get a game that directly addresses the multiverse connection to Sinnoh, Giratina would be the natural centerpiece, which leads to the next question. Could a new form for Giratina in future generations? The idea of a primal or mega evolution has been floating through the community for years. A primal Giratina would make enormous sense. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, primal reversion was tied to the ancient power of the world's natural energy, the same energy that allowed Groudon and Kyogre to become their true, unrestrained selves. Giratina's origin Forme already feels like a primal state, but what if it could draw on the raw antimatter of the distortion world itself? That form would be terrifying. A mega evolution, on the other hand, would be more controlled, a forced transformation through a key stone. Picture a Giratina whose body becomes even more wraith-like, its 6 ghostly appendages turning into ribbons of dark matter, twisting reality around it. It could even gain a new typing. Ghost Dragon is already strong, but imagine Ghost Dark or Dragon Fairy to counter its weaknesses. The franchise has been teasing new evolutions and forms for older legendaries for years. With the current generation's focus on Paradox Pokémon and Terastallization, the time is ripe for Game Freak to revisit the Creation Trio. After all, they've given us a huge amount of new forms for legendary Pokémon across the last 3 generations, from the Ultra Beast to the Ruinous Quartet. But Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina have remained static since their origin forms debuted. A primal Giratina would not only satisfy lore cravings, but would also fit the growing narrative of the multiverse. It could even tie into the idea that the distortion world is not just a prison but a source of infinite power. Power that, if fully unleashed, could collapse all universes into one. That is the kind of high-stakes story that would make Giratina the ultimate antagonist, or the ultimate ally. Where does that leave us? We stand at the edge of an infinite network of distortion worlds, each one a mirror of a different reality, and Giratina, the Renegade, is the force that binds them all. It is not just a guardian of one realm. It is the eternal sentinel standing at the threshold between every possible world. It watches, it waits, and when the right game comes along, it will rise again, ready to remind us that the boundaries we take for granted are nothing but illusions. The next chapter of this story is already being written, somewhere in the depths of the distortion world, and its title is The Eternal Guardian. And so we find ourselves standing at the edge of the distortion world, looking back at all the paths that led us here. After discussing what the future might hold for Giratina, whether we will see a primal form or a new evolution of its myth in some future Legends game, it feels right to pause and reflect on what this creature truly means. Not just as a legendary Pokémon to be caught and stored in a box, but as a presence that has lingered in the collective imagination of fans for nearly 2 decades. Because Giratina is not simply a monster to be defeated, it is a symbol of everything that exists beyond the comfortable boundaries we build for ourselves. It is the shadow that we are taught to fear, the exile we are told to avoid, the distortion we are trained to correct. And yet, when you look closely at its story, at the way it intervenes in Platinum, at the way it rises up not to destroy, but to protect its domain, you realize that the Renegade may be the most misunderstood being in the entire Pokémon mythos. There is a profound irony here that deserves to be spoken aloud. Giratina is called the Renegade Pokémon. It is branded as violent, unstable, too dangerous to exist in the normal world. Arceus banished it to the Distortion world, and for generations, that banishment was framed as punishment. But if you follow the thread of the narrative through Platinum and into Legends Arceus, you start to see a different story. The one who truly threatens the fabric of reality is not Giratina, it is humanity. It is Cyrus, with his cold, sterile dream of a world without spirit. It is Volo, with his obsessive hunger to meet a god. It is the ambition of men and women who cannot accept the world as it is, try to tear open the boundaries of time and space to remake existence in their own image. And when those boundaries are broken, when reality begins to crack and bleed, who is the one who steps forward to contain the damage? It is the Renegade, the so-called violent one, the exile, the creature that was cast out for being too wild, too chaotic, too much of a threat. In the climax of Platinum, Giratina does not attack the player without reason. It is provoked. Its world is being ripped apart by the meddling of Cyrus and the clash of Dialga and Palkia, and when it emerges, it does not seek to destroy everything in its path. It seeks to restore the balance, to push back the forces that are unraveling the very laws of physics. It is the guardian of the distortion. Yes, but that distortion is part of the natural order. Without it, there is only the cold, rigid structure of time and space. A universe without mystery, without depth, without the possibility of change. Think about that for a moment. The being we are taught to see as the villain, the dark one, the one who represents antimatter and chaos, is in fact the one who saves reality from the self-destructive greed of humanity. Cyrus wants to create a world without emotion, without conflict, without the messiness of life. He wants to erase the distortion, and in doing so, he would erase everything that makes existence worth experiencing. Giratina, in its strange and alien way, stands against that. It defends the cracks in reality, the weird corners where gravity works differently, the silent places where the normal rules don't apply. It is not the enemy of order. It is the protector of the space between. This is a beautiful and necessary truth. There is a reason why shadows exist. You cannot have light without them. You cannot have a stable world without the possibility of distortion. The distortion world is not a prison. It is an ecosystem, a realm that is as real and as vital as the one we walk through every day. Giratina is its warden, its caretaker, its living heart. And when we think of it as a dark creature to be feared, we miss the deeper lesson that the myth is trying to teach us. That lesson is about acceptance. Acceptance of the parts of reality that we do not understand. Acceptance of the parts of ourselves that feel broken or strange or out of place. Giratina has become, for many fans, a symbol of the outcast, the misunderstood, the one who is powerful but alone. It resonates because we all know what it feels like to be dismissed, to be told that we are too much, to be sent away because our presence disrupts the comfortable order of things. And yet in the end, it is often those very qualities, the wildness, the intensity, the refusal to fit neatly into a box, that become our greatest strength. Giratina may be banished, but it is also essential. The distortion world may be strange, but it is also beautiful. As we take our final look at that world, Let the image settle into your mind. The floating platforms of rock, the waterfalls that flow upward, the eerie stillness that hangs in the air like a held breath. This is a place that exists outside the rules we take for granted. It is a place where the normal laws of physics have no authority, and yet it is not a place of chaos in the sense of disorder. It has its own logic, its own harmony. It is a different kind of order, one that we are not trained to see. And Giratina moves through it like a living poem, its origin Forme trailing light and shadow, a being that is at once ancient and eternal. This is where our journey ends. But the story of Giratina will never truly be over. It will continue in the hearts of every player who wandered into the Distortion world and felt something shift inside them. It will continue in every new generation that discovers the Sinnoh, myth and wonders about the third figure in the shadow of Arceus. It will continue because the questions it raises are timeless. What is the price of order? What is the value of distortion? And who decides which parts of reality are worthy of existence? Giratina does not answer those questions with words. It answers them with its presence. It is the eternal guardian of a realm that most will never see. A realm that exists as a quiet hidden mirror to our own. And in that mirror, not just a legendary Pokémon, but a reflection of the darkness and the light that we carry within ourselves. So let the screen fade to black now and let the silence settle. The Distortion world is still there, spinning silently on the reverse side of everything you know, and Giratina is still watching, waiting, guarding the boundary between what is and what could be. It is not a villain. It is not a monster. It is a force of nature, as old as the universe, as real as time and space, and as necessary as the shadows that fall across the dusk. Sleep well, knowing that even in the distortion, there is a strange and profound peace. And as you drift off, remember that the most beautiful things often come from the places we least expect. The Renegade has shown us that being different is not a flaw, it is a purpose. And that purpose, like Giratina itself, will endure forever. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.